I call this meeting of Tacoma Park City Council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Williams.
I'm here.
Councilmember Daniels Cohen. Here. Councilmember Grimes. Councilmember Mail.
Here.
Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
And the first order of business tonight is that it is Ward 4 night. So welcome to everybody who's here from Ward 4. And Councilmember Siemens, if you want to take over for Ward 4 night.
All right. I thank you, Mayor, and welcome to everyone. Especially welcome to the residents of Ward 4 who came out tonight. I appreciate you all coming. I know there are quite a few people who are still out in the atrium partaking of the refreshments, and they'll be in soon. Tababu, would you do me a favor and help Mr. Lovelace get in here? I thank you. Oh, someone else is. Thank you. Anyways, tonight, Ward 4 night is the night when people from residents of Ward 4 get a chance to come here and talk about the city and what the issues are that you see, what comments you have about the city, and how you think the City Council could make this a better place for all of us, improve the quality of life for you and your neighbors. I know there are a couple of issues that people have talked to me about this evening and the last couple of days. One of the things is, and I'd like my colleagues on the council to give this some thought, is we've recently developed some condominiums in the community, and that one of the problems throughout the nation with condominiums are the homeowner association fees, and many times an owner of a condominium doesn't pay their condominium fee, and that puts an undue burden on the other owners in the same building. I have been told that Prince George's County has addressed this with some legislation, and I wonder if this is something maybe we could take up in the future. And Barb, it would be helpful if the city attorney could get back to us with some information about kind of what latitude we have and what we can do in helping the condominium owners to enforce the condominium fee. Thank you. Another issue that was brought up was the apartment buildings as commercial residences and commercial buildings aren't served by the city public works trash collection, and many of the residents in apartment buildings are kind of envious of the better service that is provided by Public Works here in Tacoma Park than what they're able to get commercially. And as we have thought about improving our budget, in the past we've talked about maybe turning our trash service back to the county and using the county trash service for our single-family residences. And I wonder if it might not be an idea, and this wasn't mine, this was suggested by some of the apartment residents, that we consider providing commercial service, trash service to the commercial businesses in Tacoma Park. And we've talked about economies of scale that could be realized by the county, and we found out that in fact was not helpful there, but maybe the economies of scale where we can provide better service to the commercial, and at the same time maybe improving our budget by either having additional revenue or decreasing some of the code enforcement problems we have. I wonder if I'd like to put that on the table, that we take a look at that on a future agenda. Okay. So those are the things that people have brought to me prior to this meeting. But I know many of you came because you have things to talk about tonight. You want to see the City Council in action, and also want to share with us your ideas about how this could be a better city. So without any more, what we'd like to do is have you each come to the podium and talk about what you will. Give us your comments, your questions, and there's not a time limit for anybody, but as you see, there are quite a few people here tonight, so the mayor, I think, will go ahead and run the timer so you know when 3 minutes is up, and that's probably adequate for everyone. Okay? Not gonna hold you to it, but it'd be a reminder that there are other people waiting for a chance to talk. Thank you. So who's first?
Okay, so I guess we'll go to Mr. Lovelace in the back, and just a reminder, if anybody wants to come to the podium and speak, if you can tell us your name and where you live, even just the street or building, and that helps to identify. And we'll go to Mr. Lovelace first, and then over here.
Hello, my name is Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, the Franklin Apartments, Ward 4, your favorite peace delegate. I'd like to bring up an issue tonight that I hope that everybody's aware of. It's called redistricting. I'm worrying about if they change part of my ward to another ward, I'm worrying about losing my my councilman, Terry Siemens. You know, because I voted for him, and if I wanted somebody else, I would have voted for somebody else. I want to keep Terry, and I'd like to see it possible, if they have to switch him to Ward 5 or Ward 3 or whatever, can they switch the Franklin Apartments over there with it? So we can keep Terry Siemens. We cannot afford to lose him. You know, I campaigned for him, I worked for him, I've done everything I could, I voted for him. Now, I'm asking the city council, please, don't take him away. You know, we're losing Chief Rakucci in July. We've already lost Ruben Snipper. I mean, what more can we lose? We can't keep losing like this. You know, this city's going to end up jacked up if you do. You know, we cannot afford to lose our councilman in Ward 4. You know, because we get him, we get George, we get two for the price of one. And I don't want to see us lose that. You know, I've enjoyed Terry so much, and I'm looking forward to voting for him again. And if it's possible, could they move him over to our ward and keep him on Ward 4, or could they move the Franklin along with, because we're on the corner of Ritchie and Maple. And Terry, what's wrong with this? And Terry lives on Ritchie Road. Ritchie. He lives on Ritchie, and he's not living very far from us. So if they have to switch him, can they switch the Franklin with him? Because he has done a lot for the Franklin Apartments that you people could not imagine. You know, he's helped a lot of us survive. We cannot afford to lose him. And that's another reason people have got to remember the importance of the vote. You know, you've got to get out there and vote on every election, even the local elections, because they're very important. They decide what you want to do with your city. If you want to keep the city rolling smoothly, you've got to vote. And it's never too early to register to vote, because that's what's going to keep Terry in office, is votes. It's our vote that counts, and I'd like to make sure, because I voted for him, I don't want to lose him to redistricting. That would be a tragedy. You know, because Ward 4 means a lot to me. I don't want to lose Terry Siemens. I don't want to lose Joyce. I want to keep my ward intact. You know, we also got to work on keeping crime down in the gangs. And Terry has done a lot to work with that. So please, let's keep Terry Siemens in our ward. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jacquette Frazier. I live on Maple Avenue. I'm from the Hampton House. I want to concur of what this gentleman just said. I've worked hard in Tacoma Park. I have engaged in the community. I raised my daughter here. She's a college graduate, about to be a transit police, Metro Transit Police. It was a good neighborhood for her. I'm retired now. I'm a disabled person. Terry has engaged with the community for a long time. He's worked with us, and we don't want to break that down. Redistricting this area is going to be hard because we have a relationship with him. I'm from God Glorified Church up here on Geneva Avenue. My church has followed me. We're investing in this award, and Terry is a part of that. The kids know him, respect him, We have been in this community picking up paper, trash. Terry, his wife's there, he's there. We've been working on a lot of projects, and we're now just getting ready to jump off into good things. The coming up event is the 23rd of June. We have the Jewish, the Presbyterian, and my church. We're all coming together. We're trying to do something, and Terry is a part of it. And we are proud of him. He's worked hard. Every national night out, I remember him be hot as hell. Terry's got on his suit, trying to look good, trying to make a good impression. You know, this is what we need. Some people don't even have fathers around here, and they can go up to him and say, "Hey, hi, how you doing?" So I want to say, please reconsider. We love him in Ward 4, and we want to keep him.
All right. Love it, love it, love it.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Diane Berkeley, which you all know. I am the voice of Franklin Apartments. No one wants to see the rezoning because that would interfere with a lot of things. As you know, I'm on all kind of committees because of Terry and Joyce. Now, I don't know whoever's coming in, but I don't think that it would be a close-knit community like it is now. As you can see, the majority of the people here are from Ward 4, the Franklin Apartments, and some from Rich, and we do not want to see it. I have talked to people, they say we voted him in. How can they just say, well, he's not going to be here anymore? We're going to put somebody else in his place. What's the purpose? I am also helping the voters. I get up there, go to door to get people to vote. And if you can just say, when Terry is, we're going to replace him without a vote, what I'm doing is in vain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Love it, love it, love it.
Just a reminder to folks that the redistricting proposal came from the redistricting task force and the council, and not from us. And the council is going to take it up in discussion later in this evening's meeting.
My name is Susan Leach. I live in Center 620 Maple Avenue, Takoma Park. And I'm a foreigner from Guyana. And when I retired, I came to live in Takoma Park, and the first people I met with was Mr. Terry Simmons and Joyce. And they're the ones that led me to Takoma Park, to different committees, to know everything that is going on. And I can remember in the past years, we voted for Terry very hard. We worked and we voted. And I don't think it's right now for them to move it, especially in Franklin Apartments, where we all senior citizens, and we have different health experiences. And they're the ones that help us through with our food and everything, take us grocery shopping, and I don't think it's fair for us to lose someone like Terry Simmons. He is a person, he take off his jacket, he take off his tie, he roll up his shirt sleeve, and he will help us. He doesn't make no difference in nothing. And we love him to death. We love the way he acts, the way he appreciates us, and he comes to our activities, and they're really good people to us. And I don't want us to lose people like this. He worked hard. He worked hard to build Ward 4. And I hope that they would let him remain there, regardless of the zoning, whatever it may be. I hope they will let him remain there, because we would be losing a good person. Somebody you can call any time in the night, because I remember many nights I call him. And I would say, Terry, I'm hearing something, like something going on, and what is going on? And he would be able to tell me what is going on. And I know, you would be comfortable during the night, and then next day you can be able to relate to your colleague tenants or neighbors, in Franklin Apartment. So I think this is a sad affair, and council should really look into this experience. And let us get some kind of satisfaction. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I thank all of you for these kind comments. As the mayor was saying, the redistricting is, those were just proposals as far as the changes of, moving the lines and who would be in which wards. But I do want to encourage people. I know that's an important issue for our neighborhood and something that we will be talking about and the council will be deciding. But I do want to encourage people here tonight to also talk about other things you'd like to see in the city and how we can improve the quality of life.
That's a good idea, but one more comment on the district. Two more. My name is Rabu Asafra, and I've been very active, as the many before me spoke. First and foremost, because I want to lead the change I seek, but the opportunity was provided to me by the exemplary sample Terry and his wife have done. But I don't want to talk about Terry. I want to talk about the community that has built as a result of the commitment that is made. The districting has to pay attention to the human capital, the social fabric, the human relationship created. And any policy that doesn't pay attention to that is a fraud by design. So I'm here to put my voice in the record in the strongest voice possible. This districting, the task force has to look at people, and it will be putting a crime to break this community apart. And the policy has to be real. It has to come to grassroots and see the vitality of our people. I just want to say that. Thank you.
My name is Louis King from the Franklin Apartments, 7620 Maple Avenue. And I want to talk about the things that Mr. Terry did. And I don't want to see it change. I want to see it stay the same as the other people said. He have did a lot for the people in the building. A lot of people in Franklin building never have been anywhere but the grocery store and the doctor's office and back to Franklin building. You ask Mr. Terry or Miss Joyce to come and do things for you, they don't tell you no. They tell you, I will see what I can do. Last week, the storm, a lot of Lake Twister went off. No one could see, It didn't go off in hours, been an hours I remember. But if it had, all I had to do was call him and ask him, could he come and check it? He wouldn't have told me no. He would have told me, give him a amount of time, and he would have been there. If I have to go at the grocery store, and I don't have no way, all I have to do is call Mr. Simmons. So, Mr. Simmons, could you take me to the grocery store? Will you take me to the grocery store? Give him a amount of time, he's there. Tonight, I didn't see him in no car. He had cars to drive, but I didn't see him in one. He was out there like I was walking. He didn't have to do it, but he was doing it. And that's what I like about him and his wife so much, because they do things for people that they don't have to do. And that just shows you how good that they are. I would like to see take the people's in the building, old senior citizens like myself and other people, take them to ball game, take them to baseball game, football game, take them fishing, get them out of the building. Let them see what other peoples are doing and the way other peoples is enjoying themselves. And then they will be able to see how other people are doing things, and they will appreciate Mr. Seaman and Miss Joyce taking them different places. And that's all I have to say.
And Barb, I think what I heard in that discussion there was a subtle reference to our recreation department and some ideas about what maybe kinds of programs that at least some of the residents in Ward 4 would like to see. The Thunderbolts baseball games don't cost a lot, wouldn't cost the city a whole lot other than some bus transportation. Organizing a fishing trip for the seniors might be another idea that might cost a little bit of more money, but I think also that residents would be willing to pay for that if they could budget for it in advance, and something that would be really appreciated. Thank you.
Matter of fact, I can arrange the fishing. I do that probably 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah, but you're cooking them.
That too. Hi, I'm Chef Smokey. I'm a new resident in Tacoma Park in 7610, but I was a long-time activist with Terry Seaman while I was living in Burtonsville. I worked with Terry and Joyce for about 3 or 4 years, if not 5 or 6 years. Every opportunity I got to work with them. I came from Burtonsville to work with this guy, and his passion drew me to him. I met him in a very peculiar way. I won't get into that discussion.
Praise the Lord.
But I just want to say, I know you guys don't really make the decision, but I would believe you would support Terry in this mission and not redistricting Ward 4. I couldn't wait for the opportunity to move down here. And I've been waiting for like 5 or 6 years. And I just moved down here about 6 months ago. It was a passion to get closer to this guy so I can help more in this community. I just can't imagine, no pun intended, you guys standing by and let this happen without standing behind him and supporting him, because I've seen him support you guys in your wards in various different ways. So this is a team effort. I would believe you guys would stand behind Terry and fight with him about this redistricting project. Again, good guys like that are hard to find. They far few and in between. And I believe each one of you individual support your ward the same way. And just put the shoe on the other foot. I don't think that would be a good fit. It wouldn't feel too good. So if it's happening to you, Ms. Cohen, I hope it's not. And if it is, the same thing, ditto. I just want to say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, and you'll be hearing from me. Smokey, thank you.
Thank you.
It actually is our decision, I guess, Darrell, where the lines ultimately get drawn.
Okay, hello, I'm Diane Berkeley again. I was thinking about flowers and getting the Maple Avenue, kind of build up since it's the main street. Put flowers or something out where it would look good. All right, thanks.
Thank you again. Other people want to speak? They'll bring you a microphone.
Hi, my name is Sharon Reed.
Yeah, it's on.
Hi, my name is Sharon Reed. I live in Essence House at 7777. And I wanted to know, how come y'all remodeled this building? How come there's no lights in the front? Why is it so dark?
We wondered the same thing, and we put money in the budget to put lights in the front.
Thank you.
They're coming.
Thank you.
What other things would people like to see or would make this a better community?
All of Tacoma Park?
Sure, why not?
Flower Avenue?
Munch.
Green Street?
Well,
We're-
in a few minutes, we'll do that, okay? Right now, Ward 4, but thank you.
Still Ward 4.
Yeah. Other folks want to speak?
Anybody else want?
Come on, Norman.
You came to speak for you, Terry, but you don't want us to say what you got.
Hello.
That's what I came to talk about.
Why don't you, some of you all talk about the gardens that you've done down near the Franklin? I know some of you out there are growing stuff in those green bins. I call them coffins, but I know that you're, because I see the stuff growing. I pass by it every day. There's somebody out there, Norman. I know you've got stuff growing in there. How did that all happen? It's pretty exciting as a community leader to see that happening. Somebody out there, I know one of you out there is growing stuff down there.
Wait a minute, let Gladys go ahead. Let Gladys go ahead.
Hello, my name is Gladys Harvey, and I live at 151 Ritchie Avenue. What I want to say is that I work very closely with Terry Seaman, and I work very, very closely with Joyce Seaman. And before here, I lived on Roanoke Avenue, and I was never in the committees and the things that I'm in now, not until I got to this ward. When I got to this ward, I learned a lot of things about the city and a lot of things about everything because of them. These are very good people. And, you know, together we stand, but divided we'll fall if this thing goes through. And Tatoma Park will never be the same. We are a good community, and I love this community, and I hope that we will be able to, that everybody come to understand it and not to do what they're trying to do, because that would be such a terrible mistake. So I just said, please, y'all work together and not let this happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, people,
Yeah, go.
a lot of people going up to the podium and.
Okay. One of the things I wanted to say, Jaquette Frazier, Maple Avenue. I'm on the board of chair. I'm involved in almost whatever will happen in community thing. But what I want to say to talk about the plants. The city has applications for anyone who wanted to participate in growing those vegetables and plants out there in the boxes. You just apply for it, and I think you pay, what was it, $15 or $25? $25, and you can go and people also, surprisingly, we had the city join in and help water the plants too. So it is a success. We just need more participants with that. But my concern is now that I'm retired, I'm home, and I don't see it because I would be at work. But I know now I'm going to see the youth. I'm very concerned about the youth. Yes, the rec department, that's the rec department, but the rec department doesn't get enough money to, they might have one or two programs going on at a time, but we are going, I mean, we've really done well as far as community, and I work with a lot of different people, but it's not enough activities for these kids. I hate to walk down Tacoma or down Maple Street and see those kids standing out there on the street. I don't like that, and it doesn't make you feel safe. They need something to do, and I don't care if the rec department don't have the budget for it. We sometimes can make amends and have a little side something set up. We got to find something for these kids to do, because so far Tacoma Park has been really improving. It has changed a lot. And so we wanted to keep going, and so I feel a stagnant going on right now because there's nothing for these kids to do. And see, these apartment buildings, you know, these families, 120, 118, this house and X's house, these are high rises, so it's a lot of kids, but you don't see them because you're at work, and then by the time we come up and work, we'll see them a little bit, and then they're in the house. But it's summertime coming up. School's getting ready to get out. I want to see something for these children to do, because we say, look at these kids clustering around their and idle minds. People, when you have an idle mind and you don't have nothing to do, they start doing stuff. We have to give them something to do, and the rec center can't do it by itself. They can't. So we have to think of something, and I will even volunteer myself tonight. Whatever you come up with, I'm there. But we need these kids to do something. That's all I have to say.
Good, thank you. And I'll just remind folks that if you weren't there yesterday was the grand opening of Tacoma Pine Branch Park, and there's a lot more facilities up there that I hope everybody will use. Other folks want to talk?
Go for it, Susie.
Talk about the bin.
Somebody else going to talk?
Susie, you said you wanted to talk?
About you, but you said you didn't want to hear about you.
The rest of us need to.
So, all you do for work. Well, I'm looking at this map here, y'all have the awards, and I'm noticing Terry's is awful small.
You got to use the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at this here, and I'm seeing that Ward 4 is very small. And if you're going to take anything, why don't you just take some Award 1 or some Award something and give Terry that and keep Terry in Ward 4?
Ward 4 is small but tall.
That's true. It's got a lot of apartments. Yeah, it does. But Terry might have a little couple more on Ward 1. Just keep you in Ward 4. There you go. That's it.
I want to be a big mouth, but I have one more issue.
Go ahead, because nobody's
Nobody's talking.
pushing you away from the microphone.
Okay. I want to know who. I think that I want Tacoma Park, the city, to make every apartment building handicap accessible. There's still not apartments that are handicap accessible. That's a problem. I know, what's that apartment across the street from us? Maple View is not accessible. And if it's up to the owner, I mean, you guys at least enforce it or help or something. You know, that's my biggest, I want everyone to have access, because when we're working with the community and we're trying to bring people together, we'll go to each apartment and we try to have a meeting and make them feel involved, and we can't have meetings over there for, if you're handicapped, you can't come. And that's not good. So that's my issue.
Thank you. Other people wish to speak?
Come on, Norman, talk about those girl ladies.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Caroline Robinson, and I live in Franklin. As far as finding things for children to do, you have to first find the parents. Because if you're going to find something for them to do and the parents are not somewhat involved with it, it's not going to last. It's not. And so that's the first thing to do. And how many parents are here tonight with children? I mean, mine grown too, but if I had children here, grandchildren or something, I certainly would get involved, because when you get involved, then the children will get involved. It has to be something that they can talk about over dinner or any time. But you have to have parents. You can't, you all can't do this yourselves. You have to have parents.
There's a couple things that I would like to ask, just real quickly. Chief Rakuchi's here, and I think people in Ward 4 feel pretty safe. We have the lowest crime rate of any ward in Tacoma Park, but But I'd like to ask how you feel, out there on the streets. Are there any crime or safety issues that you would like to talk about tonight?
Yes. At, what is that? That street coming down by our place. Ritchie and Maple. When the police are somewhere chatting with each other or chatting in buildings, they should be watching those stop signs, because they never let you get across before the cars take off. And sometimes when they see you, like this afternoon, they saw me coming with a cane, and they barely stopped at the stop sign because they did not want to wait until I got across. And that's bad. That's really bad. So you need people watching that instead of somewhere running their mouths.
Well, I'm sure that they are doing other important things.
Yes, the restaurant here on Maple Avenue, I would like to see the police get those kids out of front of that restaurant, standing in front of the restaurant. if the carry out, the carry out there on Maple Avenue, if I wanted to go and get some food to eat at a certain time of the night before it closed, I don't want to go there because I'm a senior citizen. I don't want to go there with a teenager hanging out in front of that cafeteria. I'm afraid that something's going to happen to me with them hanging out in front of it. And when I get halfway there, if I see them, I'm going to turn around and go back to my apartment because I'm afraid to go across the street because they're standing out in front of the carryout. If the police would get them from standing out in front of the carryout, I think it would be a lot better. You know, a lot of people say, well, they don't bother you. How do I know that? I don't know that. You know, I don't know whether they're going to bother me or not.
Well, see,
You know?
this goes back to what I said about the kids. Okay, we can't put the whole thing on the police department. We are the parents, we're the grandparents, we're the first teachers, we're the primary teachers. So I guess what we're saying here is that our city needs to be engaged with the citizens and the parents and the kids and let it all come together, because you should not have to be afraid to walk around in your own community. But if the kids don't have anything to do, they got to do something. We got to get on the parents and make the parents do something. Those are their kids. You're just the police department. They're just the city council. So we as the people have to get involved with our own families and our own community. But when we get their attention, I want to be able to say, here, this is what you can do. Okay, they got to have something. If people are on drugs and you tell them to say no, you got to have something for them to do after they say no. Okay, so we got some good kids. They just don't have anything to do.
Here, here.
Now, I'm going to tell you what I do. When I go
No, you can't tell us without a microphone behind you.
When I go down to the store, I see a bunch of kids outside. And the first thing I do is speak. And then I go in and I come out and I said, does anybody want some candy or soda or something? See, you have to let the kids know that you are friendly. You have to. If you're going to be afraid of them, you're defeated. You have to let them know that you're in the neighborhood and you somewhat care. I don't care if it's your last dollar. You're helping somebody. And who's going to get anything from the good Lord without helping somebody? It doesn't work that way.
Sound like you're part of the team.
Yep. Mm-hmm. That's what you spoke. Yep. Stingy people.
Hello. I want a couple of comments. One is I've seen the police up at Pete's Sub Shop. What he does, the fellas will, if they see the police coming down the street, when they'll go across the street, and then when they leave, police go back, then they'll come back. So they just going back and forth. The police is doing a good job, because sometimes you don't see that many people, that many kids out there. And when I go up, I just go up and get what I want and come back. I don't be worried about them or scared of them or anything, because certain people can sense fear. And if you go up there with no fear, you don't have a problem. And I wanted everyone that came to support the redistricting, to oppose the redistricting, to stand up. The Franklin apartment people. The Franklin Ward 4. All of Ward 4. So, thank you all. If I think about something else, I might come back.
Well, I want to say one thing that the lady was talking about, the garden.
Right.
is it possible that you could get more land to raise more, and we raising in the garden that you was talking about? Because it's very small, you only can get just so much in those bins that we have for garden.
We're trying to get a larger space. It may not happen it's not going to happen this summer, but it may happen in the future. There may be a larger space over at the recreation center, but I know it's far away from you. We do have a garden down here at the police station that we're working with the youth. Shawanda is helping, plus several other people in the neighborhood and the kids. So if you want to help, it's Mr. Lewis, right?
Right.
Lewis, if you want to help, I know somebody here I know knows your name, and we'll maybe get in touch with you to help us out a little bit. It's a bigger space. It's a 20 by 20. So we raise a bunch of stuff in there. Because you all grew pole beans last year in those teeny tiny little, I won't call them coffins anymore, I'll call them green boxes. We decided to grow pole beans this year down in our garden too. So you all were a system of support, and it's pretty exciting.
And we're looking for additional areas, even for this year, for a winter garden, fall garden.
See, the mayor knows more than I do about it, and that's a good thing.
Hi, I'm Sherry Renaud, and I'm also a Ward 4 person. I live at 110 Ritchie. But I'm also the PTSA president for Montgomery Blair High School, of which a lot of our citizens go to that school. A lot of folk here have kids and grandkids who go to that school. So I have a couple of things that were kind of on my mind. One is that the students at Montgomery Blair could surely benefit from the wealth of experience here. So we're always looking for internships and always looking for folk to come to the school and talk about maybe life as in politics or in community service. So I'd like to just kind of throw that out there. I'd also like to add my amen to the police, because in the 6 years that we've lived here, the traffic that used to kind of cross through Ritchie and go across Piney Branch and then back down to Maple has significantly diminished. And so as a citizen on Ritchie, we most definitely appreciate that. And then I'd like to say, too, that, and you're talking about the youth, and you're talking about community building and things to do. I think that people really enjoy, like, the 4th of July parade. I mean, it's a huge community event that brings out the young and the old. And then you have the things that people do beforehand, and then the whole community thing after. I mean, we might consider some other kinds of things, maybe on a smaller scale, that could involve the entire community, and then would, in fact, engage the youth. So that was one idea. And then I'd also like to, since I'm amen and everything, I'd also like to say that I, too, agree about the beautification of Maple Avenue. And you look at historic Maple, like once you cross Philadelphia and go that side. It's very lovely over there. Houses are a little bit closer, but there's nice and manicured gardens and stuff. And it's really looking a lot better on our side of Ritchie. But I think that some little landscaping here and there would go a long way to help beautify Maple. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Susan Leach, and I would like to talk a little about going down Maple Avenue, past where we live in Franklin's, on the right-hand side. I think they want a little cleaning up, and if you can plant some flowers or something. Going to the, I don't know what is that street name, but to the end of Maple Avenue on your right-hand side. That part over that side, it's a kind of bushy. And we need some cleaning up and, some flowers to beautify there. No, before you meet the hospital. To that building where we used to keep the 4th of July? Going down to the end, on the right, it's very bushy there. It wants a little cleaning up. And then on my left now,
Thank you.
Since there's a lull in the conversation, I wonder if Wolfgang Mergner might want to step to the podium and talk a little bit about the senior group that he's put together. I know there are a few seniors in the audience. Well, I know maybe one or two seniors in the audience.
Well, I'm very grateful for the support of Terry Siemens and his wife, and of the council member Grimes and Kay for helping to get this off the ground. We are in Montgomery County one of the senior groups which are mainly people who work from the bottom up instead of from top down. And this is our strength, and I appreciate everybody who is in the room here who has helped us. We come back to the council, hopefully in July, and we'll report on our findings, and we'll make suggestions to the council based on all the work we have done in these groups. Thank you.
And Wolfgang has his meeting once a month, and I think all seniors are invited to come to help with the planning.
The next meeting is on the 19th of June. It is an evening meeting at 6:30, a work session, working on the report which we will submit to the council.
And that's going to be here at the community center?
It'll be in the Celia room.
Okay, thank you.
Fortunately, I think it's not only seniors who are invited to help.
Anybody else?
I just want to thank the City Council for giving the senior citizen program a little more money. It's a great job you're doing, and I enjoy the activities, going on trips, bone builders, yoga, and our bingo and advisory committee meeting where we can, just give our opinion, and then we would do whatever we have to do. I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank everybody for coming here tonight and sharing your opinions and your questions, your comments. I also want to remind people, since we have a captive audience here, that Joyce does operate the Piney Branch Pool. She manages it, and she has a lot of programs there, including water aerobics and maybe some water polo, water volleyball that might be of interest to some of the people here tonight. So don't forget, it's a nice swimming pool within walking distance of our ward. It's in our ward, and you should consider that when we're thinking about how we get more exercise.
And I'll add that somebody, I don't remember who, brought up possibly a group going to the Thunderbolts baseball games. The Thunderbolts season opens this Thursday night, the 7th, and games are at 7 o'clock. And it's possible to get a group together. It could be Ward 4 group, it could be the Franklin, it could be, whatever group wants to go, and let me know or let the Thunderbolts know, and we can get you a bunch of group tickets, free tickets to go. So
Okay. Well,
lots of opportunities. There will be 20 dates over the next 2 months.
Let's announce tonight then that we're Ward 4 is going to go to a Thunderbolts game. Okay. And Mayor Williams has offered to buy the tickets. Okay.
Cheers for the mayor.
And now we'll twist the city manager's arm and see if we can get some transportation. Okay. And we have somebody with a commercial driver's license in the audience who says he'll drive. So. Oh, good.
Good.
All right. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks very much.
And please stay for the rest of the meeting. You don't have to leave.
And
But before we end, we want to say that, look, I love living in Tacoma Park, and I love the council, and I have Ward 1, Grimes has come out and listened to some of our how we feel about things. We want to get involved with Ward 6 because we always seem like because of the distance, you guys are left out. So we have some plans in Ward 4, and we have a lot of things we want to do. And we love what you guys are doing for us. If you don't know, there's a line dance class in the morning and in the evening. It's a lot of little things around Tacoma Park that make it Tacoma Park. But so I just want to thank you all for what you do. That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, love it.
Joel, did you want to say anything tonight? Joel? No? I know we have a number of Asians that live here in Ward 4 that are here with us tonight. I don't know if any of you have anything that you would like to talk about the neighborhood. I know some of them use the Piney Branch pool and are very thankful for that. But thank you all for coming.
Yep.
And we'll take a short break.
Set this all up, you know.
She's setting it up.
And we'll proceed with the rest of the agenda. There are no additional agenda items. I will just briefly point out a couple of upcoming meeting items. Next Monday, June 11th, we have a presentation on the proposed zoning text amendment having to do with revisions to the accessory apartment approval process. The following Monday, June 18th, is Ward 6 night. And a reminder that that will be from 7:15 to 7:45, and the meeting will start at 7:45. Everything is moved back 15 minutes from the usual times. And also a reminder that the council will be in Ocean City for the annual Maryland Municipal League Convention, so there will be no meeting on Monday, June 25th. And at this point, we're attempting to schedule it so that there is no meeting also on Monday, July 2nd. So there will, if all goes according to plan, we'll have a meeting on June 18th And then the next meeting after that will be Monday, July 9th, which is Ward 1 night. And somebody was asking tonight at the reception for Ward 4 when Ward 2 night is, because they live in Ward 2, and that's Monday, July 23rd. That's the last one in this series of ward nights. At this point, we'll go to public comment period, and this is time for anybody who has any comments on anything not on our agenda or anything on the work session. So it's basically anything except voting items for this evening.
Good time to talk about Flower Avenue?
Yes. Go ahead.
Hello, my name's Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue, Ward 4, the official peace delegate. One thing I'd like to say tonight is what you saw tonight in Ward 4 night. I want to thank everybody for coming out. We saw something called community participation, citizen participation, where people come out and speak up. That's what I've been wanting to see for a long time. I'd like to see that happening a lot more often because people have got to realize that we do have public comment periods. You can hear me now, running off of the mouth. You know that I'm here, and you can be out here too speaking on anything that concerns your city or anything that concerns anything. You can come out and speak out because that's what public comment is for. You know, community participation. I'd also like to say that if the parents have their kids at home and they want to have something to do, bring them out here. They're safer here with their parents than they are on a street corner shooting up drugs, waiting for the gangsters to try to get them. We don't want them joining gangs. We want them to become useful citizens as they get older. And I think that if parents bring them out here, that would, in teaching community participation, that would be one of the great ways to do it. Instead of waiting until there's a major issue coming up, people have got to stay participating. I'd like to see more people from my ward coming out every week and speaking out. I'd like to see people, again, learn the importance of voting. For God's sakes, that is a very important issue. As we have learned, people are now realizing it now, because a lot of people said they voted for Terry Siemens, they don't want to lose him. And I think, you know, we should carry that on through the, not just one issue, but all the issues that we care about. This is Tacoma Park. We have backbone. We don't want to lose it. We want to continue strengthening it. And the only way to do that is voting and community participation. If we can get people involved in our affairs around the city and involved in helping our city make proper decisions, that is great. That's what public forums are for. That's what the public comment period's for. Public. And people can come out because they are part of the public. So I want to see if they can come out more often like we did in Ward 4 night. I'm really proud of the people that came out tonight and spoke up, and the people who came just to be part of the audience. I want to thank everybody because this is what I've been working for. Community participation. You know, now I'd like to see the people who have participated come out and vote, every one of them. I invite them to bring their friends out and get them registered to vote. It's never too early to register to vote. But like I said before, if you wait too long, it can be too late. So please, come out and participate more often and start taking our city a little more to heart and try to make this city a better place than it was when we got it. That's what being a peace delegate's all about. That's what being a peace activist is all about. And that's what standing up for our rights is all about. Don't wait till they're being taken away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to speak on May 21st when you were voting on which proposal to accept for the Green Street project. So I'm here to speak about the Green Street Flower Avenue project. But I do understand that you're waiting for some legal documents to be returned, so those have to then be signed for it to actually truly be finalized. So I know that there's a teeny window here that I'm trying to squeeze in. I feel like I'm a little bit late on this, speaking to you guys about all this. Anyway, my name is Sean Surla. I'm a landscape architect, and I work with natural systems, promoting natural systems into infrastructure and architecture, and with a main focus on water runoff issues and new urban innovative green street design. So basically, my whole life at this point is about innovating how we build streets in cities, in America and everywhere, in the whole world. So I've been involved in this project since I moved. I grew up here in Tacoma Park, and I lived over 12 years on Maple Avenue, and a year and a half ago I moved to Erie Avenue, which is Ward 5, which is when I found out about the Maple Avenue Green Street project. So since then, I've been working always possible to become involved from the ground up, inception for the design part of this project, because we are not doing all that we can, and to keep doing the same thing. I mean, yes, we do have, ever since Al Gore's movie, yes, there's been a shift, and we are actually now aware, and we're in, Tacoma Park, and we are one of the most innovative communities in the United States, probably. And yet, still, we fall really short of the things we could do to be outside the box, to be actually really building the streets in a way that saves the water runoff and everything else in that nature. So I wanted to just quickly say that, as a backstory, that I tried to bring a new, Lee and Associates over a year ago was committed. They're a landscape architecture firm in D.C. that does innovative green street work. I had them on board, and then it took a whole nother year for the RFP to come out. In that time period, they dropped out because it wasn't worth enough money to them. This project is relatively small. And then I drummed up another group, Van Sweden and Associates, who are another DC cutting-edge sort of green design landscape firm. And this project was too small for them. So I managed to then get on board with Sabre Wang and Associates. So I was a part of that package. And today I just got a look at the 9 proposals. So I was part of Sabre Wang, and you guys on the May 21st picked RK&R as the project proposal package, and you signed off on that. So RKR and Sabre Wang, in my understanding, in addition to ADA, is it telling me I have to stop?
Just if you can wrap up your comments.
These are our organizations that you use, and so I got a chance to finally look at this today, and there isn't anything any newer in these packages. Maybe Studio 39 was the most innovative, and they were part of the final 4. And you went with the known factor, and I was part of the other known factor, which was Sabre Wang, which happened to be on the other end of the coin. So I'm coming to you saying, how can we really involve the community? We have a community of experts, I'm one of them, in this particular area in Tacoma Park. How can we really do that in a way that we can partner with the expertise that we have? I want this project to be a showcase for the rest of the world. I don't want to bring it to Virginia or to New York or China, or wherever else I can get these ideas implemented. I grew up here. This is like my place. I would like to see it. Seventh-day Adventist is a perfect example of the ideas that I have. These are very simple ideas, and they are not in any of these things here. Okay, they haven't quite been done what I'm proposing. So I'm asking you, first off, going forward, that maybe we can separate the design from the design, build, and engineering, because that would be one way. But this has slipped. You guys have slipped this through. I'm not trying to put you down. I'm just new to this government action thing. I'm a designer, artist type person. So I'm just learning the ropes of how this works, and I feel like I'm coming in kind of, even though I've been approaching this from all sides, to be sure that I can work directly with this at the ground up. And then the other thing is, I know that you have funds for a sustainable coordinator on a contract basis, and I asked Daryl Braithwaite, and I haven't finished talking again individually to some of these you members, but she said it was only for energy use, not for water runoff issues. So I think that's kind of absurd that we have funding for a sustainability coordinator on a contract basis, and that couldn't be used as a means to bring people in. To say that you're going to have 2 public meetings later down the road when all is said and done is not the way to go about designing for the future and making this, the community we really want it to be. And to help Maple Avenue, just for my 2 cents as a landscape architect, and the flowers, trees. They don't realize, the public, that it's trees that need more trees, shade trees need to be planted on Maple Avenue, basically. And flowers are always beautiful. So,
Thanks very much, and I hope there's an opportunity for you to work with the city and the firm that we're contracting with, and make sure that some of your ideas can have the chance to get incorporated.
yeah, well, I look forward to talking with you all individually about it.
Mayor, can I ask one follow-up
Yes.
question?
Yes.
Could you give an example, Sean, of a couple of the simple design elements that
Yes,
didn't
sure.
make it?
We've been designing the same for 2,000 years like the Romans did. For 2,000 years. Yeah, Roman streets. So it occurred to me in this process of working on this for over a year and a half, this particular street, that we need to switch the grades. So that instead of the grade being below the curb, we need curbs with curb cuts and the grades reversed, so that the water actually runs, when it's flowing the streets, it follows into the gutters, but otherwise it goes out and into the yards. Now, yeah, you're going to argue, well, the homeowners don't want that. I argue, if you can afford a home, you can afford some French drains. I do residential landscape design, and I know how, I've been fixing these things for 20 years. And I don't even want to hear about, I am just up in arms that, the people that can buy houses get to be the ones that get to say, oh, a little bit of water might be a problem. So in any case, this is way we need to be designing into the future to save our watersheds, to save our precious resources for everyone, poor, rich, all of our grandchildren, not just the people who can afford homes. So I know the solutions for the homeowners as well as the solutions for the streets are there. That's one example. Then there's retention basins, which aren't in the kinds of levels in these proposals that aren't in here. You've got simple new ways that people are doing it now with these bioretention areas and bump outs and things, but this isn't really the way. The way to do it, and the way I propose, you wouldn't even need to, it would cost a lot less. It's grade changes, gravel, and we could actually do this at Seventh-day Adventist without any harm to anyone and prove we could stop that onslaught of water, that river that comes pouring down and just right off of the Seventh-day Adventist onto Carroll Avenue, if we could implement what I'm talking about. And I can show you, I will come back. I have the drawings and the plans. I can actually show you guys what it is.
Thanks, those details help.
Sorry, I went on about it.
Councilmember Grimes, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I don't have any special technical expertise in the things that you're talking about, so I very much appreciate your coming forward to talk about them. I will note that the council is in the process of reconstituting the Committee on the Environment, and that would perhaps provide an opportunity for residents such as yourself to participate in the various projects that we have going, and I'm sure that there will be a variety of additional projects in the years to come.
Oh yeah, you'll be seeing me.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all.
Any other public comment?
Hello. My name is Kathy Porter. I live in the 1000 block of Elm, and I'm here to talk about redistricting. I was writing you all a long email, and then when I finally got it to say what I wanted it to and was about to send it off, I realized it was way too late that you guys were already here. So I'm going to read it to you instead. I would like to suggest that you go ahead and estimate the current population for the 2 large buildings on New Hampshire and on Maple Avenue. As I look at the numbers presented by the redistricting committee last week and look at Susie's analysis that's in your packet this week, it seems that a lot, not all, but a certain amount of the neighborhood splitting is due to the population variances caused by these vacancies. The other problem that you're going to have is that if you don't correct the undercount, I'm calling it an undercount, if you don't correct this undercount now, then in 10 years you're going to be faced with the possibility of going back and undoing essentially the boundary moves that you made this time because you'll have a bigger population. I do understand the city attorney's advice that you can't just pick and choose which vacancies you want to fix. I suggest that what you do is that you look at vacant units by census block and only estimate current population in those blocks where the vacant units exceed, say, 10% of the total number of units. This can be justified, I think, on the basis that you're only attempting to correct the census blocks where the vacancies cause a significant distortion in the population accounts. You wouldn't want to correct the counts for every single vacancy because that would give you an unrealistic count. There'll always be some vacancies, and if you try and figure out what the population would be if you filled every single one of them, you're going to get a distortion in the opposite direction. One of the advantages of estimating the current population of these large buildings that were vacant in 2000 is that this would reduce your ward-to-ward variance. If you look at your ward-to-ward variance, Ward 6 has the largest variance from the ideal number. If the population in Ward 6 were raised by these estimates, the total variance between the largest and the smallest wards would be lessened, and that would probably give you some additional flexibility in terms of dealing with the ward boundaries. Just to be completely transparent here, I should note that the proposed changes in the boundary between Ward 2 and Ward 6 would move a big chunk of Saska, which is my neighborhood, from Ward 2 to Ward 6. I assume that estimating the current population of the building at 7333 New Hampshire would alleviate some of that. Saska is a very active neighborhood association, and taking a big chunk out of the middle, which is what both of those proposed boundary changes do, would be a real detriment to that neighborhood. And if you have any other questions, or I could, talk to you some more, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Reuben Snipper, 700 Erie Avenue, taking an opportunity to address the council on the same topic, and I was very pleased to hear former Mayor Kathy Porter talk about an adjustment process for the vacant buildings, which I think is absolutely essential. The point of using the census is to give you an estimate for the next 10 years, and to omit those buildings which are now, occupied would actually be, I think, a travesty and misrepresent the distribution of population. And the second point I want to make is that I think that moving Ward 5, taking part of Ward 4 and adding it to Ward 5, I think is not the right direction to go. I think actually Ward 5 has already a high proportion of rental property. What it does not have is a lot of single-family homes. So as the former Ward 5 council member, I think it makes more sense to move the line, if you need to, into Ward 2. I realize that's, was going to be controversial, but I think it makes more sense to add more single-family homes rather than more rental property. I think keeping the core of Ward 4 together makes more sense. It's as you heard tonight, it's a very unified group, and they need to be kept together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robert Lanz. I live at 7215 Cedar Avenue. I've served on the previous redistricting committee that looked at the 2000 census data. I read the description of the adjustments that are proposed for the vacancies in the buildings. My recollection from when we looked at the 2000 census data is we didn't do any of those sorts of corrections. We looked at the census data itself and looked at the various neighborhoods and tried to balance the actual population that was indicated by the census data. So I'm not sure whether the adjustments conform to looking at actual population. I'm not here from a legal perspective. That's the city legal attorney's responsibility, but I did want to mention that when we did the previous redistricting, we did not do it in this manner. We did it from the actual, 2000 census data, looked at the census blocks. We tried not to cut census blocks in half. We tried not to cut neighborhoods in half, those sorts of things. but I don't recall doing any adjustments for vacancies in the high-rise buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all. We'll now go to council comments. Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Now that the Ward 4 residents who came here in mass are gone, I have to apologize for being late to the meeting. Today was my son Raphael's high school graduation from Northwood High School this afternoon, and our celebratory dinner ran a little bit longer than what allowed me to have gotten here on time. So I wanted to bring up something that I think some council members at least would have hoped is passed us, which is the NDAA detention provisions resolution and the Fund Our Communities. As I had said before I voted no on those two resolutions, I did what someone who cares about those issues should do, which is to write to the elected officials whom each of us individually and not the corporation, the City of Tacoma Park, elects. I did receive a reply from Senator Cardin, who I'll read some excerpts from it, very short excerpts, that he agrees about the opposition to the NDAA detainee provisions, which we know already because he had voted against them, and that he also sees military spending as a timely issue, as it always is, given economic conditions and the critical socioeconomic needs that we have. And he does advocate increased funding for health care, food and housing assistance, and education programs. I additionally had a chance to talk face-to-face to Congressman Chris Van Hollen yesterday, whom I had also written and whose chief of staff wrote me back by email less than 10 minutes after I wrote to him, and Congressman Van Hollen reiterates his opposition to the detention provisions of the NDAA, and he spends a lot of time looking, of course, at the budget and spending problems that we have in our country that are made much worse by the political climate that we have here. So I just wanted to say once again that individual action by every single United States citizen is called for on these and other issues that affect each of us, and that looking to a corporation such as the City of Tacoma Park to advocate on one's behalf is an incomplete solution at best. Those of us who care about these national issues have a responsibility to speak out directly to the people who make decisions on them, rather than to the City of Tacoma Park, which doesn't make decisions on them. Thank you.
Councilmember Daniels-Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to have show and tell just for a minute, and I'm holding, I just want everyone to know, I'm holding the Police Department Awards banquet in abeyance for the next week or two, because I really do want to speak about that. But tonight, everyone should have gotten their Tacoma Park newsletter on Saturday. If not on Saturday, some of it may have arrived today, but it will certainly run your life for the month of June, because if it's happening in Tacoma Park, it happens first in the newsletter, and it's worth everyone's taking a moment to read it from one page to the next. It includes anything and everything you ever wanted to know about what's happening during the month of June in our fair city, and it is one of Tacoma Park's jewels. And on the subject of jewels, I had the opportunity to be at the corner of Orchard and 4th Street on Saturday night, where 4 jewels came together. It was a 2-garage band fundraiser featuring the other band and Monkey's Feather at the illustrious Tacoma Park Volunteer.
Veterans of Foreign War.
Thank you, Veterans of Foreign War Hall. Great beer, awesome bar, and a spacious green backyard perfect for hanging around. The Tacoma Foundation is the 4th jewel in that crown, and the whole evening was about fundraising for the Tacoma Foundation. And I know a lot of people know about it, but it makes and gives grants to advance the social, environmental, economic, and educational and cultural interests of the greater Tacoma Park community, plus a whole lot more. I mean, a whole lot more. This was, I don't know who actually came up with the original idea. I think it just kind of gurgled to a top. Maybe some people were sitting over dinner or wine or something. But the two bands got together. They went to the VFW, got the place, and then got the Tacoma Foundation involved. And this is real partnership in action. And more partnershiping happened in the garden. I think I talked about it earlier, but the garden in, I call it Tacoma Desert, in the parking lot right adjacent to the police department. It is a garden that is embedded in concrete, totally surrounded by concrete, but it is also a water retention, a bio. At any rate, it's a huge. What am I trying to say here, Tim? It's got rocks underneath it. It's
bioretention?
Yes, yes, that's what I was trying to say. There were youngsters, oldsters, and Recreation Committee and the Recreation Department met there to do some weeding, and we planted pole beans, which I was never really wanting to do, but the kids decided they wanted to. So, and we probably have some of the first tomatoes in the city of Tacoma Park on the vine in that garden right now. So if you pass by it, you might look, the cherry tomatoes are out for sure. So, yes. There's a fabulous herb garden that's showing a whole lot of different kinds of herbs, and if you walk past it, pick a few herbs, fresh herbs to take home and cook with. It's a really wonderful, multi-generational experience. Everyone there is learning how to plant and cultivate a garden. Old people, young people, and all sizes, shapes, and forms. Now, I'm on a partnering ship, and that's my own word, partnering ship role tonight. And this one is getting huge gold stars from me for a partnership that grew a whole park with a skate park, basketball court, children's equipment, a great climbing rock, and so much more. The park was dedicated yesterday with a huge group in attendance, a real green ribbon cutting ceremony. This partnership began 13 years ago and included Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, Montgomery Parks, the Montgomery Parks Foundation, the Steve Francis Foundation, and the City of Tacoma Park working together to create the Tacoma, well, this is hard to say, the Tacoma Piney Branch Local Park. And I know we had a lot of folks from Ward 4 here tonight talking about the youth. Well, one of those youths that grew up on Maple Avenue grew up to become a national NBA basketball player, and his name is Steve Francis. He donated a great deal of the money that put that park together, and what's really remarkable and goes right to my heart is he's never forgotten his roots. This is not the only time Steve Francis comes back to Tacoma Park. I know for a fact he comes back every 4th of July and sponsors a huge barbecue. He was there yesterday. It was so wonderful to see all of his friends and the people out to support a very, very beautiful park. So gold stars to everyone who was involved in this fabulous project. And I invite all of you all, everyone who's listening, to take a walk up Grant Avenue behind the community center, go between the two large trees, keep climbing up over the hill, because the Ed Wilhelm Field also is beautifully appointed at this time, but keep climbing up and over the hill, and to your wonderment will appear a fabulous, fabulous, well done partnered park. And it just shows that anything can be created by a partnership and people who won't be stopped. It shows the real potential that Tacoma Park has for a job well done. Thank you. And it was incredibly invigorating to feel the passion of the people from Ward 4 tonight. My hat is off to Terry and all the folks who came to speak. A couple of them brought a tear to my eye because I know this may have been one of the only times in their lives they've ever come up to a podium and actually had something to say. That's a pretty intimidating place over there. So my hat's off to them. Their passion is just remarkable. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
I'm trying to get my mic to come on.
To ignore the lights, just push the button.
Oh, that's my old seat,
doesn't work.
and it doesn't come.
Doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
No, you're on.
I am on, even though the light doesn't
on.
come on. Okay. Sorry, I'm new in this
That's
chair.
because we paid too much for these buttons.
Oh, okay. All right. We can't afford to have them all work at the same time. Noise in Ward 6, noise is becoming a persistent problem, as many of my constituents and residents know. And I'll be pretty open and frank about the thing. The primary problem that we have in Ward 6 has to do with Zion's Evangelical Lutheran Church, which I have been told is renting out its facility, which is fairly large. It'll hold several hundred people, in order to have rental income to support the existence of the church, which is all well and good, and certainly is the church's right to do. Unfortunately, these events have been led to a lot of outdoor public alcohol consumption, confrontations with the city police department officers. It has resulted in arrests. It has resulted in a lot of loud noise that far exceeds the city's noise ordinance, that has disturbed a lot of the neighbors. The city police department, I want to thank them very much, the chief in particular, for their persistence in trying to alleviate these problems or to quell it, but they persist. And therefore, the reason I'm bringing this up at this occasion is I want residents who are disturbed in any way by the activities that are been going on at this church that are outside the acceptable norms of activities, please call the city police department and report what you hear or what you see in the way of noise or outdoor consumption of alcohol, or any other things that might be of concern to you. Because this allows the police to have a track record, gives them a purpose to then to go to the location and to take care of the matters that they best know how to take care of without anybody getting hurt. But if it's not reported, or it's reported too late, then the police are not necessarily going to know that there's an issue there on any particular occasion. So this is a request to residents of the area to help the police department do its job. June 18th, which is 2 Mondays from now, is Ward 6 night. There's going, in addition to Ward 6 night, there will be 2 matters on the City Council's agenda, tentatively, that will be of particular concern to residents of Ward 6. The New Hampshire Gardens Civic Association has submitted a petition to the city to create a parking permit zone on certain blocks of Wildwood Drive, Merwood, Kingwood, and some other, as well as along New Hampshire Avenue. And as part of the approval process, the City Council is required by city ordinance to hold a public hearing. So therefore, if we're going to get this approved by the City Council, it's important that residents show up. And so this will be occurring on the same evening as Ward 6 night. Also, residents of the Hillwood Manor Association, which is part of Ward 6, will have also petitioned the city for a traffic calming project, particularly along Erskine Street, to see if the city can undertake some studies and perhaps do some physical changes to the to Erskine Street to calm traffic. And in order to get a project like this moving, this has, under city ordinance, has to go through a petitioning process, which the community association has done. They've touched all of the bases, and the last base to be touched on this is for the City Council to hold a public hearing on this project. In fact, the approved budget for fiscal year 2013 includes money to undertake this project. And so it's also important for residents of Hillwood Manor, which is part of Ward 6, to show up and support this petition with your comments. And finally, the last thing I want to comment is that since the beginning, since really in early March, I guess it's well into approaching 2 months, if not approaching 3 months, the Department of Public Works, a contractor, has been actively building sidewalks, laying new curbs as part of that project throughout the New Hampshire Gardens area. I just want to, I'm bringing this up as a way of, to say thank you to the Department of Public Works. I think the staff there has done an excellent job in choosing the contractor that they have. The company has been moving swiftly throughout to get these sidewalks built. They're looking great. Tonight I had the pleasure of actually walking my dog on a sidewalk on Wildwood Drive for the first time in 26 years of my living there, and it is a joy to be able to walk up Wildwood Drive without having to constantly look over my shoulder to see who's buzzing along behind me. And so it won't be long, you're going to have children on tricycles and parents with strollers and all the other good things that happen on sidewalks. So I just want to say huge thanks to the Department of Public Works. Project's far from complete, but it probably will be complete in the next maybe 4 or 5 weeks would be my judgment. And if anybody's anywhere from the rest of the city and any other wards that are contemplating sidewalks, regardless of where you might live, I suggest you come on over, drive along some of those streets where the new sidewalks are. It's pretty evident where they are: Lockney Street, Kennewick, Kirkland, Wildwood Drive, and you can get a feel for how the engineers have managed to work their way around established trees and preserve the environment and still build really attractive ADA type sidewalks in the area. So this is just to say thank you to our staff for the work that they're doing. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to, as Councilmember Daniels-Cohen did, compliment everyone on the event at the new park, the dedication yesterday. It was fantastic. The event was fantastic. The park is fantastic. It's just such a beautiful park. It has as she said, the new skate arena. I don't know what they call it, a skateboarding arena? Skate spot. It's more than a spot. If I tried it, I might be a spot there. It's amazing that these young kids are already out there performing stunts that are just incredible. But then to see the other facilities there, the soccer field, the baseball diamonds, the basketball courts, and there are now 2. And the one, thanks to Steve Francis, is an incredible, great neighborhood basketball court with 6 rims there, so they can play cross court or full court. And I really thank Steve Francis for his remembering of the community where he grew up. I was kind of heart-wrenching to hear how important this community is to him, and how appreciative he is of the support that he got as a young person who lost his family when he was very young and was raised by his grandmother. But I understand that not only was he raised by his grandmother, he was also raised by the local Tacoma Park Police and the Tacoma Park Recreation workers who helped him through those difficult young years and helped to channel his energy towards what he really enjoyed, which was basketball. And that led to his success in basketball. It also helped him get through his high school diploma and get into college where he could continue to play basketball and prove himself and join the NBA. Again, I thank Steve Francis for what he has done to help the young people in this community now. And then secondly, I wanted to spend a little more time than Ms. Daniel Cohen's did on the Police Awards Banquet. I know she'll be bringing that up again in a couple weeks, and I think I know why she's doing that, because she's heard that our police chief is retiring again, and hopefully by then he'll be able to tell us where he's going to be going next. But anyways, it was not just an incredible banquet. I mean, I think the people who organized it did a very good job, but it was just really heartwarming to hear the stories and to see the awards that our officers received and the civilian workers in the department. And it really made me proud as a city council member that we have worked to improve our police department, and Chief Rakucci has done a fantastic job with the department. But more importantly for us as a community, the officers and people in the department have done a fantastic job, and it was recognized at the award banquet last week. And I'm hopeful that when the new chief comes, that the city manager will talk with him about possibly making the award banquet a more public event, because I think what we heard as council members at the award banquet was about things that we knew about, but you really got to put a person and a face to these things. And I think it is a community, and I think we expect our police to be part of the community. Well, I think the community should be expected to be part of the police too. And so I would like to see us have the award banquet a more public way next time. Thank you.
Can I do one, if I'm quick, if I promise?
If you're quick, because I haven't gone yet.
I know, but I'll be quick. I just got to underline what Councilmember Seaman said. To have the opportunity to actually see the police officers and hear, I mean, when you read Kathy Plevy's report, this happened, that happened, certain people were abducted or were arrested and blah, blah, blah. That reading it is one thing, but actually seeing the officers that did what they did and completed a job was really remarkable, and it really lets you know that Chief Rakucci has created a huge legacy that I hope it's going to be very difficult for him to leave. So I really appreciate it. The one nifty thing about being a council member is you get to be invited to all these fabulous things, and this was just one of the many, and I was really appreciative that I had the opportunity to be there.
Brief is here.
Yeah, brief is. I wasn't brief. I'm sorry.
I've just got a couple quick comments. I want to make a couple quick comments on some of the items people have already covered. I'm sorry I wasn't able to be at the police banquet on, I guess, Friday night? Friday night, because I was in Pittsburgh. I had been hoping to go, but couldn't, and sorry to miss it. I was also sorry to miss the fundraiser at the VFW on Saturday night. However, I did return to town in time to hear a little bit of the music after I got in bed. And I think I was about a mile away.
Yeah.
So I did hear some of that music. Also, just want to fill in a gap or two on the comments that have been made on the park dedication. I don't think anybody else mentioned that there's also a dirt volleyball court in that park, which is not anything that I have seen anywhere around here. And,
Sand. It's sand.
Sand.
It's sand, yeah. Sorry.
It looked like dirt.
It's dark sand.
But it's something that I think would be really valuable for this community to have, and I hope people use it. I used to play volleyball, and I'd be tempted to go up there and play. And I also noticed that they had extended the fences behind the two side baskets, because the woods were very close, and I imagine that basketballs were anticipated or already had gone into the woods a fair amount. They raised the fence by 4 feet, and a number of us thought they might need to raise them yet again. But it's a wonderful-looking park, and there was a great turnout and a nice dedication. And I'll just turn briefly to a couple upcoming items. I'll be going to my local government advisory committee on the Chesapeake Bay meeting in Lancaster later this week, and I can report back on that when I return. As we talked a little bit about in the Ward 4 part of the meeting, the Thunderbolts open their season this Thursday, June 7th, all the home games are at Blair High School, and those are generally at 7 o'clock, except on Sunday evenings when they start at 6. And it's a great opportunity to go to have a nice evening with family and friends, and it's inexpensive entertainment, and it's a great way to see some baseball, and it's always cool there because there's always a breeze.
Does it break out a lot?
I don't know. There's always air moving there that makes it much cooler than anywhere else. And for anybody who doesn't know, the Thunderbolts are a summer wooden bat college-age baseball team. So players are recruited from around the country and also from locally. And the final thing I'll just mention again is a week and a half from now, Wednesday, June 13th, is the Maryland Letters for Marriage Equality fundraiser and campaign kickoff, and that's at Montgomery College from 5 to 7 on Wednesday, June 13th, and that's at the Student Services Center atrium. And there's information available on the web, or you can contact me or any number of other people. And I think we're all set on council comments, and so we'll go to the city manager's comments, and I know the chief is here.
Yes, over the past 10 days, we've had a number of burglaries in the community, and I thought it might be helpful to have the chief come tonight and to talk about the police department's response to these incidents.
Good evening. First, thank you, Councilman Siemens and Councilwoman Cohen for your kind comments about the awards banquet. I, too, thought it was the best one we've had, at least in the 5 years I've been here, but thank you very much. You have in front of you a worksheet. I would caution you, we have exact addresses, so please don't share that with the public. The rest of the information I'm going to share with you now. Recently, there's been an increase in residential burglaries in the Ward 1 section of Tacoma Park. Since May 24th, there have been 6 daytime burglaries, residential. All have occurred between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4:20 p.m. Subjects are gaining entry into residence through 2 ways. 1, unlocked windows and locked windows. In 3 incidents, the suspects removed the screen from the windows and used a hard object to break glass. The other 3 incidents, the windows were left open, so they just removed the screens and made an entry. As a result of the spike in the burglaries, we immediately in May initiated a detail that's in the neighborhood right now, using both patrol, plainclothes, detectives, walking beats, undercover officers. We're out in the neighborhoods. We are speaking to residents when we see things that could be make safer in their homes. We're talking to them, telling people to be on the lookout for suspicious people. We're also working very closely with victims of crime to identify and locate the property taken towards the burglaries. Already we've located some of the property and have a possible suspect that we're working on. This is an ongoing investigation, and our detectives are working closely with our allied law enforcement agencies who are experiencing similar burglaries. On the other side, the county's getting hit twice as hard as we are right now. Officers are driving through windows, and one of the things through neighborhoods, and one of the things we've noticed is that many residents, because of the nice, wonderful, cool weather, are leaving their windows open. Well, that's really great during the day, and I understand, especially since I grew up in this area also, as a kid, that was nice. You could go out and leave your windows open. Unfortunately, we are in an urban setting today, and I recommend that people, when they do go out, to close their windows. I think it's a lot safer. I'm sad to say that we have to say that in a society, but I would say that in every place I've worked. It's much safer when the windows aren't open. And we are so close to so many different jurisdictions. We're an easy target because of the nice neighborhoods and the nice homes we have. So we want to do everything we can to make it much harder for the criminals. And I'm not blaming victims, I'm just trying to give them information to make themselves safer and protect themselves against burglaries. When the windows are open or when curtains are left open and you leave, all they have to do is look inside, and most of us leave our computers on the table, video games, and things they can see them when they look in. And when they see something like that, then they feel it's a good target. One of the other things, summertime, working in the yard, people are leaving sheds open, and they're stealing bicycles and landscaping equipment. You need to lock your sheds when you go in at night. Don't make it any easier. The weather's changing, school will be out in a week, and we expect there'll be a lot more people on the streets. It's important for everyone to be vigilant and proactive in their communities. Officers are going to be stepping up the efforts as we've been doing and being more visible. We are offering our community liaison officer, Carla McNay, will come out and do security surveys. You just need to call in the station, and she will come out and schedule one for you. The biggest thing we've needed, we've had a few problems where residents saw something, once again, it didn't call. Please, call. The dispatchers know what we're working right now. Don't worry about it. Let us decide if it's suspicious or not. If you see somebody or something that looks unusual and hits you wrong in your neighborhood, please call us at 301-270-1100 so that we can send the officers out. If you don't want to call us, you can text us at 847-411. Then you type in TPPD tip at the beginning of your message. You can go on Facebook and send us a tip. We need the community's help. We have got lots of officers out, but as you know, we're not going to be there 24 hours a day. Right now, we have a pretty good time period when the burglars are working it. We do believe it's the same group, and we're hopeful with locating some of the property will help us in closing. As you look at your chart, you can see it's a very small area, and they really haven't went out of their, what I call their comfort zone. So we're hopeful that we can continue to work this area and be good. Just so you know, property being taken, computers, laptops, jewelry, and cameras. Just so you know, they know what kind of jewelry they're looking for. They're not taking costume jewelry. They're very good at what they do, so it means they're career burglars, which makes it a little bit harder, but that just makes it a challenge for us. I want the community to know that we are out there. We read their concerns and understand them. I saw a lot on the listservs, received a lot of emails of people that are concerned. I talked to a couple tonight before we came in to reassure them that we are out in the community. We take this very seriously and want to put an end to it. And obviously, we need everybody's help. So anyone that can call in, we'd appreciate it. Any questions?
Thanks, Chief. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is that I know there was a burglary in Ward 4, which is not on this map, and I just wondered if you thought that was related to this?
It's not connected. It's the one I'm thinking of now.
Okay. And
Are you talking about the one where they took the baseball equipment?
Yeah.
I believe that was probably someone that was familiar where this equipment was.
Okay. And the other question is, you mentioned that community involvement in this. I understand that in one of the cases, the residents actually saw what turns out to be probably suspects leaving the house and knew it wasn't their neighbors, but didn't think it was important to call. And that's, again, an example where I can understand the person feeling that at the time, but how it's important that if you see something that is unusual in the neighborhood to call. And the other was someone hearing the glass break and again, not calling, just thinking it was unusual, but not wanting to bother the police. And again, just
We need the help.
emphasizes the
Today,
importance.
I think our message is starting to get across. We got quite a few calls today. And as of right now, I haven't seen anything, so I think we're safe for at least today. We didn't have any. We had two yesterday on Sunday, which I would tell you in my 42 years, very unusual to see residential burglaries on Sunday because everybody's home. And so that bothers us, so it's important. And we started to see a lot more calls come in today, and I'm hoping after tonight, I encourage the community to call. It is not, don't worry about how busy we are. Our primary goal right now is these burglaries to make it safe and catch the
What was the number again?
301-270-1100.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay. we will move to our special session item, which is item 2 on the agenda, and this is the resolution regarding the Tacoma Junction crosswalk and signalization. Councilmember Grimes, you want to?
I'll be happy to move this resolution.
Okay.
Although I note that I guess it's co-sponsored, if we had such a concept, by
Well,
Councilmembers Daniels, Cohen, and Mail.
There will need to be a mover and a seconder.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? One thing I wanted to find out, I know that there was some question about whether the staff had any concerns or suggestions, and I wondered whether those got incorporated, how those got incorporated, or if there's any ones that weren't that we might need any information on.
Sarah Danes had made some comments on the draft resolution. She had suggested that the council may want to consider having separate resolutions so they could be more easily transmitted to the agency in question. So she had suggested one for SHA, one for Montgomery County, and one for PEPCO, for example. Some of her comments were questions that were answered. She wondered if, to what extent the proposed crosswalk might conflict with other things that are being considered for the area, and also she wanted to remind the council that a number of these things are just not under the city's control, but of course the resolution urges that the agencies in question take action. I think the question about the December 31st deadline that she had raised regarding this is that my understanding is that the resolution is requesting that SHA take action on the requested crosswalk by December 31st, that the staff would submit the request and the resolution, and that the council was requesting that crosswalk be installed by December 31st. Let's see. Sarah had commented that the city may need to be prepared to cover the cost of requested analysis of the sequencing of the traffic light. I'm sorry, it's very small print. That the city may need to be prepared to fund some of the analysis regarding that signal light. And she's wondering if if any of this could be incorporated into the streetscape project proposed by staff during the budget work session. And the last thing was that Sarah, I guess, wanted to remind the council that SHA is required to follow standards for installing a crosswalk, and that even if the council requests that SHA do it, that doesn't mean that it can happen, because SHA has to follow certain standards.
Right.
And you all have received copies of
Okay.
these comments, so
Thanks. I just
that was
wanted
it.
I wanted to make sure that we were aware of those. Councilmember Siemens.
That's an old light.
Oh, Councilmember Schultz.
Is my microphone on? I guess it's
Yep.
on for permanently.
Always assume it is.
Okay. Yeah, I think that some of Ms. Daines's comments are reasonable. I'm not going to say which ones and exactly what the wording needs to be, but it would suggest that some of these things probably ought to be taken into account, and I wonder why they weren't taken into account before this was proposed to put on tonight's agenda. I guess customarily, if we're going to put together sort of a question, a resolution, that it should always be sent over to staff just to make sure that we've dotted our i's and crossed our t's, and so that we have a well-written, thoughtful, so that we're not running into any confusion unnecessarily.
Did City Manager have a comment?
No, I just wanted to note that Councilmember Grimes had shared this resolution with the staff. We were probably a little late in getting our comments back to him.
Okay.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought I would respond to some of Ms. Dane's comments regarding splitting out a separate resolution that addresses PEPCO. We are specifically asking for upgrades to the electrical infrastructure that would support putting into action equipment that is under the control of the SHA. Therefore, it seemed like it should remain with the SHA call in particular, because we are not asking only on our own. We want to essentially ask the SHA to ask PEPCO for us and other state representatives who have some influence with the SHA. So that was a reason for leaving the PEPCO in with the SHA. Regarding the streetscape project, my own attitude is that we've been seeking to reinstate, according to Councilmember Daniels-Cohen, we had a crosswalk there. We're seeking to reinstate a crosswalk that used to be in the location proximate of where we would replace one, and that I would see this as becoming a, let's call it a fact on the ground for the streetscaping project when we do undertake it. In other words, it would have much greater standing if we do it sooner rather than later. And we have heard from so many community members, including ones who have come here to the council to petition for the for crossing guards in Tacoma Junction. We've heard from the Tacoma Junction Task Force, from I believe the SS Carroll Neighborhood Association on this issue, that they consider this crosswalk to be independent of any streetscaping issues or needs. Let's see. Yeah, sure. We know that we can ask for something, and that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen, and it might not only be because of professional judgments about whether something is actually feasible or safe or whatever. We all know that that's a possibility always, that there can be lots of reasons. And, as for funding, well, there's a good way to discover who would be funding what and how much these things would cost, which is to actually start undertaking the study, evaluation of the intersection that would be conducted by the SHA, given the state highways there. And so it does seem logical to find out about that, and the way to find out about that is to get the ball rolling here. So, those are my responses to the comments that Ms. Daines had, and I do appreciate her making those comments and her involvement with the Tacoma Junction Task Force when we were discussing these issues and other ones relating to the Tacoma Junction streetscape and pedestrian and signal and traffic and all of those kind of issues.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on the suggestion about splitting this up. I see the value of this document as really, in part, giving clear direction to Tacoma Park City staff of what we as council hope you will work on, and clear direction. To the extent that it's a document that can be helpful when advocating directly with PEPCO or state highways, if we need to have a letter from the mayor on letterhead that more clearly pulls that out, I would think that's something we can do without council action being part of the process. I mean, if you've got a resolution, the mayor adds a letter to the packet that says, by December 31st, we hope you will do this, or we would like you to do this. That's a way to deal with that suggestion. The other is that, just commenting back, for me, joining council, we quickly got into the discussion of our priorities for the county council, and the legislative calendar came up very quickly. And so in documents like this, we're starting a process now, or at least the way I see it is we're starting a process now to start working on policy changes that we want to see, and this, not just in this resolution, but in other places, we're starting to identify things that if we can't find some resolution through staff and council work, that we would try to push with individual county council members, with members of the state legislature. So I think that's the other value of a document like this, is it's setting a goal for ourselves and trying to get there through staff support first, and from there it's back in our court if we can't make progress. We're laying out a benchmark for the community. Thank you.
Councilmember Daniels-Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much, Sarah Daines, for your comments. I mean, it does, they're definitely a different side of the coin. I know that what concerns me about actually asking, putting this in a resolution, when we met with come on, Kay, you can say this, the State Highway Administration, they clearly said that Pepco wouldn't, was stopping, we're not upgrading the electric to the lights, and that's why they couldn't go forward. I agree with Councilmember Mayle and Councilmember Grimes. We got to start someplace, and maybe pushing them to make this happen is a very good thing. I don't know that I want to break that out either. I looked at it and I thought maybe we should, but I think we need to push State Highway to make Pepco do what they're supposed to do. I mean, enough time is enough time already. The other thing, I know I read this and I went, oh, practical in all events by December 31st. Well, my first shot at it was, I'd like this to be practical in all events by September 30th. I know none of you are surprised about that because it's been a long time. I mean, it's only like 90 days away. It's not impossible to have happen. I can live with December 31st. It is actually reinstating a crosswalk that was there prior to whatever caused it to go away. So there's no new news with this crosswalk. It's really quite old news. So that's it. I don't know. No one can say why they changed it. We haven't found that out yet. So I'd like to see this go the way it is. We got to start somewhere, and this would be where we need to start. I'm thrilled.
I'm happy to have all of these things in the one resolution. I think we can deal with it fine that way. I had it's not a big question. I had a question as I read through it about the next to the last, therefore, requesting WMATA and Montgomery County Ride-On to evaluate resiting of the bus stop. And I guess I'll be interested to see what they say about that, because I know there's the pullout that kind of changed policy on whether they use the pullouts, but I also wonder about whether moving it to the location between Grant and Philadelphia will cause additional problems or not. So I guess the evaluation would be interesting, but I have my doubts that it's going to prove to be any better. Is there something that...
Yeah, at the request of the city clerk, I'm just drafting very quickly a whereas clause that justifies that, therefore be it resolved clause, which I would read. It's a succinct, I would hope, statement of
and you have
cause.
it ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
The bus bay located on Ethan Allen Avenue at B.Y. Morrison Park is often ignored by buses which face difficulty pulling back into the traffic lane, and buses stopping in the traffic lane cause vehicle backups. I think that's the reasoning behind seeking evaluation of relocation of that bus stop.
That helps. And so the mover and the seconder are fine with that amended language?
Yes.
Okay. Any additional comments? Any public comments? Okay. All those in favor of this resolution with that changed language, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes. And thank you for those who initiated this and pursued it. So we will, if I get the pen to write, there we go. We will move to our work session. We have two remaining items. The first is a discussion of the recommendations of the redistricting task force. And we have the city attorney here, also Deputy City Manager Ludlow. And does either of you want to say anything at the beginning, or we can just start? I wasn't sure if you had anything you wanted to say first. You're fine?
I think it's fine to come out as...
Okay. Yep, that's fine, just wanted to make sure. I guess I had a couple of questions that I thought maybe I would put on the table first. And I think there's a question here maybe for the task force and also for the attorney, and then just a couple of comments. The one for the task force is whether you all had any public hearings on what you had considered. Okay, you didn't. I was thinking about that as I was looking through the information, and it also occurred to me when we had the Ward 4 night at the beginning of the meeting this evening, when we had about 25 people here from Ward 4, and I think about the first 8 or 9 people who spoke, what they wanted to talk about was don't change our ward, don't redistrict our council member out of the district, and the huge majority of people, when asked, stood up to say they didn't want to see that happen, and please don't let it happen. So I was thinking about getting the input from residents and kind of how they think about what's important in redistricting. And so I think we've heard that tonight from Ward 4 residents, and we'll have some opportunity to hear it from other people as well, because my sense is that the time frame on this is that we'll have some discussions, and then we'll, of necessity, have some public hearings on this as well. I also wanted to find out either from the task force or from the city attorney about, I didn't see any of the any analysis of in the 2 proposals that were put forth about the breakdown of race in those ones. Was that done? Was that in there? Did I miss it? Is it? I saw it for the original, but was it for option A and option B? Okay. And I guess I'll just say that my sense of how redistricting has operated in the past and how I was thinking that it would happen this time was that, I guess in 1995, I'll say, it might have been 1996, after the annexation in 2003, there were various proposals that were put forth that made fairly substantial changes, and what the council ended up doing was kind of taking the existing and trying to tweak it. And my sense is that that's probably what we ought to do again. And I'm interested to see the information about how to deal with the vacant buildings, and I wonder if there's any additional information that either the deputy city manager or the attorney would want to provide about how we have to think about doing that if we want to go there. You've provided us with some information in the packet, but I'm thinking, and we have kind of the numbers, but I want to make sure we understand the framework for how we would have to do that in terms of, well, gee, if you're going to look at a vacancy, you've got to look at all the vacancies and whether we can kind of do as was suggested by, I believe, the former mayor, of looking at the significant ones and drawing a line and saying, we don't have to look at absolutely everything.
Certainly, we'll leave the legal discussion to the city attorney, but I did want to go over a little bit about the numbers. I think one of the things that's just unfortunate is kind of the timing of the renovations of the two buildings, in particular the one in Ward 6 that's so large, and the time that it takes to repopulate that building and part of this process. The way that the census works is it counts the number of people in housing units as of April 1st, and in this case in 2010. We did have quite a large number of vacancies, particularly in one building in Ward 6, and what that meant was that there were, in 2000, this particular block in Ward 6 had 1,031 people, but in 2010, the same block with the same number of units had only 609 people. And so that's a fairly significant difference. The building is now being repopulated. Part of the information that I provided was that when I provided information to the redistricting task force, at the time, there was only 71 properties that had been purchased kind of between April 1st and the time that I spoke with the redistricting task force, and there have been substantially more since that time. So one of the things that I think that is, it was a challenge for them to try to decide, is 71 units a substantial enough number to deal with? Now that it's later, the number is 108. So we've kind of looking at just the change in time, and I think part of this has to do with what you consider at the time that you end up adopting a new ward map. For the legal discussion.
Sue? Sure. For the legal discussion, first I'm concerned that you might not have seen the memo we had written. We were told to write it for the committee back at the time they asked for some advice, and it is helpful for you as the council to get some legal advice on this question of what do you do about vacancies and the need for adjustments, or another way of thinking about it is whether you are strictly to go by the census on April 1st, or whether there's some ability to adjust. And as you'll see from this memo, and I'm sorry that you're just getting it tonight, but as you'll see, we give sort of different alternatives as to options that you as the council have, just as the committee had. And the committee obviously chose the one that maybe they thought was most litigation-proof. In other words, that if you use the census, you're pretty safe from litigation, unless someone can prove that you've really sort of gone against the standard. So in a way, that's the safest. On the other hand, we also say in the memo that there are ways to do the adjustment that will also be lawful and will be something we can defend, and that would be to number one, do them in a very careful manner, something like former Mayor Kathy Porter suggested, like a 10%. It's not every vacancy, but you set a line and say, if this 10% type of vacancy occurs, then there'll be an adjustment, but not for every vacancy. As long as you then apply that equally across the board, throughout the city, and also over time, that it's not just for 2010 census, but we would do the same thing the next time around, then I think you're also in safe ground.
Thank you, that's helpful. Councilmember Daniels-Cohen.
I think that's an old light.
Okay, Councilmember Mayo?
I guess I would just say that I like the proposal that former Mayor Kathy Porter suggested in this memo as well, that if we look at a threshold on a block basis perhaps, and if there's an estimated number of vacant units that rises above that threshold, we try to estimate population based on that. To the extent that do we need to establish it as a formal city policy, or do we just need to establish it in the course of doing
redistricting.
I think it's fine for it to be a policy that the committee promulgates, but again, it would be a formal policy, yes. It doesn't have to be an ordinance.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
I think the goal here needs to be what we could call an equitable solution to this, and I support former Mayor Kathy Porter's perspective on this. There is a difference. There's vacancies and there's vacancies, and obviously there's always, as we know, going to be a certain percentage of vacancies in the city at all times. But this is a special case in Ward 6. It's in my ward, and I was very conscious of the fact that that building was empty, or virtually empty at the time that the census was taken. Some of the units were sold, but even those sold units weren't occupied. This was about 2 years ago now. And the property has continued to be slowly occupied because of the, probably, I guess in my judgment, the recession. But it's no question that eventually, in due time, that building's going to be full. Who knows when? And I just think that in anticipation of that becoming full, that the only fair thing to do is to do what was suggested here by Ms. Porter, and given as an alternative to the redistricting committee, because otherwise we're going to end up with a gross distortion within a few years that's going to be unfair to the rest of the districts, the rest of the wards in the city. So I would favor our making this calculated adjustment and going on that basis, particularly in Ward 6. I can't speak to the other vacancy that was sort of split between Ward 2 and Ward 4, but to the extent that it's of a similar thing, I gather that it was, the building was completely empty and under renovation, then it makes sense to make that adjustment too, and I'd be inclined to support that as well.
Yeah, and that was Wards 1 and 4.
Wards 1 and 4.
Yes, but the property itself was in Ward 4.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. Yeah, I also support a careful, I think Councilmember Schultz said, a careful calculated evaluation of an estimation procedure. I do have a question for Ms. Ludlow. You have said that you are evaluating whether the city should ask the Census Bureau to formally look at a potential undercount, possible undercount here. And I believe the deadline for making that request is sometime in 2013. Yes. I don't remember the exact date. If the city does go forward with that, what would the Census Bureau do so far as you know? And if their outcome, if their finding either corroborates or contradicts what the city does in its own estimation procedure here, what are the consequences?
The challenge to the census count would not actually apply to these two buildings that were vacant. The vacant units were counted, but they were counted as vacant, and so there's not population. There are other blocks within the city where I believe they missed housing units. And there are 2 blocks in Ward 5 and 1 in Ward 1 where I think there was a significant difference. It's not to the magnitude of these 2 buildings, but I think it does, especially in Ward 5, which kind of has a potential, has some ramifications of an undercount that are a little disproportionate based on where these units are. I think it's something that is worth challenging, and I believe it's June 1st, 2013, that we have a deadline to meet. They will not make an adjustment on the vacant units. It's simply noted that they're vacant as of April 1st. What the count is, what was in the city April 1st, 2010.
All right. So to restate what you just said, that any kind of Census Bureau finding here one way or the other would basically have no bearing on the adjustment that we make for these 2 vacant buildings. What would the magnitude that you'd expect of an adjustment for an undercount for the other stuff that you just mentioned, how big might that be? Can you give a ballpark?
I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. My guess is we're talking perhaps 70 people in Ward 5, maybe 50 in Ward 1.
So not huge.
It's not huge.
Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Silver, when you were speaking earlier and saying that we could choose to do as the past Mayor Porter had suggested, I believe the way you expressed it was that the committee could promulgate the procedure. And would it be the committee or would it be the council that actually would say that this is the way we're going to do it from now on?
Actually, I'm not, I thought about that after I said it. I think I might think about that some more, the best way to do that. What I can say tonight is that however it's done, it needs to be a clear, carefully thought-through policy that is applied evenly throughout the city and over time.
Okay. It seems to me that that policies like that would be something that the council should be passing, since the committee works at the pleasure of the council.
I agree with you. I mean, the committee obviously made a recommendation already from its own findings, and you could send it back to work on them with different instructions, or you could just do it yourselves, yes.
Right.
Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. I mean, I guess just to summarize, first a comment and then summarize my views on the package before us. First, I wanted to say that I heard from many, many residents, 20 or 30 or 40, about the problems of splitting up Saska and the Long Branch neighborhood and the different proposals. So neighborhood associations feel very, very strongly about wanting to stay together. And I want to say that in any redo of these packages that we make that perhaps an even higher priority, recognizing the legal constraints we're under here. My understanding, or at least my sense of what I would like to see as the next step is one, a new estimate of the city's population with these units assumed to be full, and therefore a new estimate of the ideal population per ward. It's right now 2,700 and something, and that will go up if we add 300, 400 residents. That'll go up by 80-ish residents per ward. And then with that as the backdrop, I guess what I would be interested in seeing, and this restates what the mayor said earlier, is what would new ward boundaries look like that make as minimal changes as possible to existing ward boundaries. And that would be something somewhat different because we're clearly going to add more to Ward 6. Ward 5 is not going to change that much. So we're still going to have some boundary adjustments there. I don't know. And that sort of summarizes. And then with regard to this policy, I guess, in the course of us adopting new ward boundaries, we're going to pass a resolution or otherwise pass something. And so I would think we could establish a policy of estimating vacant unit occupancy. Could be something we establish as a byproduct or a whereas and a therefore clause in the process of doing that, and rather than having to do it separately, and thus the work associated with moving two separate items. That sort of summarizes at least my views of the work before us.
So it sounds like at this point we all want to kind of get the next look at it with dealing with the vacant, the large vacant properties, and if there are other areas that could or should be part of that same consideration, given where we might put a cutoff. It sounds like those are the two properties that are the kind of the egregious ones, but just if there's some other place that we should consider in terms of where we would put that line of cutoff for consideration of that.
I'll look at it a little bit. I mean, I think that the property in Ward 4, because it's a relatively small building in a ward that has quite a few large buildings, may not come to a trigger. That's something, I'll double check what the percentages are of these versus the whole ward to share with you,
Yeah.
and with the task force.
Probably a good idea to see what the numbers look like both ways on that.
Yeah. So I'll prepare that.
And I want to make sure we finish on that topic, because there's another one I want to ask about. So, Councilmember Schultz.
I just wanted to add that in terms of formulating a policy, could draw a distinction between buildings that are vacant, such as the one in Ward 6, that are under renovation, as distinguished from buildings that are vacant but not under renovation, because they may be dilapidated and we may not know what the intent of the property owner is. In those sorts of situations, I think you would not want to count those units, because you can't anticipate whether or not they're going to be restored, rehabilitated or not. But in the two cases that we're citing, or that you've cited, Ms. Ludlow, those are these are properties that were clearly in the process of being renovated at the time the census was undertaken, and I think that's a distinction we may want to keep in mind.
Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens.
Kathy Porter proposed, and I don't even think it was a firm proposal, it was just suggested one approach might be to say that if the number of units that were vacant in the building were more than 10% of the census block, and that might be one way to do it, but it might also be a way to say that if it's a building that is vacant and has over a certain number of units in it, then it should be reconsidered. Again, if it's been renovated or being renovated, because I think the case, as you said, in Ward 4, where you have a rather large building, but it just so happens to be in a census block that is very large because of the way the streets are laid out, and it happens to be next to a couple of very large, high-density buildings. It's certainly a significant number of people, but it's but in that particular census block, it's less significant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the criteria that Councilmember Schultz laid out, where it's vacant and it's undergoing renovation. It seems like a fairly clear differentiation with a good basis for understanding that it would be coming back fairly soon, given the kind of investment that somebody would be making. They're not going to renovate it and then it's going to sit empty.
But I think there needs to be a threshold of number of units, because would you do that for a single-family house?
I agree that the threshold of number of units makes sense. If we're finished with that one and we've provided the direction that's needed, I want to just broach one other subject that I want to make sure that we understand, and maybe understand how the task force approached this. I know you talked a little bit about it last week, and also get some understanding from staff and the attorney about any parameters that we might want to understand if we're going to deal with it, and that's splitting blocks. I know that in the past we have used splitting blocks as a mechanism to achieve our end result of a redistricting plan. My sense was that the task force said that they wanted to avoid splitting blocks as much as possible because it made for a cleaner, better result where you had less uncertainty. And if all of those are correct characterizations, then I want to understand kind of how we can approach splitting blocks.
I guess I would like to address it a little bit, and I think the task force members more directly on what they were thinking. Certainly, from a number cruncher point of view, it's much easier to have a whole block, especially when we're talking about getting the racial ethnic breakdowns, because that's very speculative when you're trying to split the blocks. I think there's also I think there's some common sense discussions that we all look at. Where are the neighborhood boundaries? Some major streets are more dividers and some of them aren't. So I think that all of that kind of comes into play. There are certain streets that I can see doesn't break up a neighborhood because it's a major street. Other ones certainly have a different feel about them, and it may be unfortunate. You may need to do it just by the nature of how things work out sometimes, but it was clear that the task force looked at that when they were going through their individual cases.
And I was thinking about it because I know the case I'm most familiar with, my own block, it's split by neighborhood association and by ward currently. So are there kind of legal parameters that we need to kind of pay attention to if we consider more block splitting?
I really doubt that's a legal issue. I think that all the other factors that Susie mentioned are helpful, and the goal is to have things make sense and be contiguous if possible, and not be based on gerrymandering. All of those things are in our charter, and I think the racial issue that you raised earlier, Mayor, is an important one also, but I don't think it's been addressed by the committee at all. There's no discussion of any concerns that way. We might want to ask the committee. Maybe they talked about it but just didn't write it up. I don't know.
Does the committee want to say anything about, reiterate anything or expand on any of your thinking on splitting blocks, or any additional consideration that you had about looking at, I guess, particularly splitting blocks and kind of understanding looking at some of the racial data when doing that?
I think what Susie said about having a consistent means for estimation was our primary concern. And please, if anyone wants to correct me or jump in, do that. When you split a block, the question is, what are the numbers? And shy of going and doing a survey of that block, there's no way to know exactly what the numbers are in any, which portion of the block. I mean, there's methods of estimation, but there's nothing that gives us an actual number. From the start, as Susie mentioned, our concern was to have really solid, defendable numbers in terms of ward size for the one person, one vote. And so it's certainly possible to split blocks. We did that with one block because in option B, as it's called, without splitting a block, we would not have had a contiguous ward for Ward 2. We had to split the block at the bottom into Flower in order to sort of bring those wards together. In doing so, what we did was just a simple proportional estimation of what the racial and ethnic distribution would be from looking at essentially the number of residents. So there's certainly the case that there are mechanisms and methods for splitting blocks. If there is any legal consideration, it would be that we have to apply a consistent mechanism wherever that is being done. But my concern is more one of, once we start splitting blocks, then we don't know what our numbers are. It's always an estimate. It's never an absolute. We're not working with any sort of numbers that are in any way defendable except through the process of saying how well that estimation was done. But when you're working with census numbers, we have some kind of a base that we can work with. Is that fair characterization?
And therefore, the kind of the validity of the numbers, it can be absolute if you don't block split, and it can be pretty muddy if you block split all over the place, but it can be somewhere in between, and you've got a certain amount of
the more you split, the more muddy it gets, if you want to use that characterization. And so the question is, what's the purpose of splitting the blocks? How many blocks do we have, and what are we trying to achieve by splitting the blocks? If we have a goal to achieve, and the question I can't answer sitting here as to how many blocks it will take to split to reach that goal. But if we have a goal to achieve, then we have to know what that goal is, some rationale for why a block should be split. And starting off, that rationale really wasn't apparent to us.
I think from tonight's discussion earlier, the goal to be achieved is the unity of a neighborhood, keeping neighborhoods together. And I think the option A with splitting Ritchie Avenue down the middle of the street is an example of where block splitting may have been a better solution than splitting a neighborhood down the middle. I'm not asking, I'm not, accusing or asking for a defense. I'm just saying that's, I think, the goal.
The problem that we have is when you have wards which are relatively close to what the community associations are, somewhat close to that. And current wards aren't all that close to it. There's 3 community associations that are split between a number of different wards. But if you have some one-to-one correspondence, then you cannot do redistricting without somehow, at that point, splitting community associations. I mean, the closer we are with that association, then change by definition is going to then disturb that one-to-one correspondence. And Ward 5, as you know, being sort of a peninsula, it's hard to find a place to do something that doesn't split somebody if you're going to add people to it, which we had to do.
The other question, and completely different if I may at this time, you said in last week that Ward 6 ended up with, I guess, fewer people in it than the other wards?
I didn't bring my numbers with me, but it's at the lower end. That's correct. Yeah.
And I guess I was curious why it ends up that way if we could, in fact, split a block and add a few more houses and make it equal.
Again, we could make all the wards perfectly equal by splitting blocks any way we want. But with all the considerations we are having, one of those considerations being to maintain the one vote, one person standard.
Right.
What we know is what we have in front of us in terms of the numbers. Again, give us a rationale for doing the splitting, and we can do it. But in that we're trying to maintain validity of the numbers, we felt that the issue isn't to get perfect, but rather to get within a certain range that's acceptable both in practice and through constitutional means.
Right.
And that's what we achieved.
And then the last thing is probably more of a comment than a question, but if you were to not split blocks at all and just go with the census numbers, it's still not absolute, right? It's still the best guess we have.
Of the actual number of people?
Yeah.
That's correct. But what we have is we have to work with something that's a standard.
Right.
And the census is the best standard we have.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz.
Yeah, I would just say that the primary criteria, and really the only one that we can use here, is to come up with wards that are as close as possible to having equal numbers of residents. Everything else is secondary. It's as simple as that. If it happens to be coterminous with an existing association, well, that's fine and dandy. If it isn't, well, that's tough. Associations already can cover in 2 wards. We have some wards that have wards that have multiple associations. So it goes both ways. So I'm not too particularly concerned about that. Obviously, to the extent that we can have our cake and eat it too, and balance our wards with a high degree of precision, and also accommodate an association, well, that's nice. The other comment I would make is that in this information we got tonight is the breakdown by the current wards of population by white, black, Hispanic, Asian, and other. I gather that information is just here for our general edification, but it has nothing to do with your decision-making. This is just how it happens to fall out.
Councilmember, it's in the packet because in their report, they provided that information for options A and B, but there wasn't something that showed what it currently is. So this is simply so that you have something to compare from what it currently is.
But I guess my point is that it's not going to be a criteria by which we design the boundaries of the wards. Okay.
It wasn't something we considered.
It was not something you considered?
Something we
Right.
considered.
Okay.
We were not asked.
Right. Yeah, I don't think you should have been asked that either.
That's not entirely correct.
People have to speak at the mic.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, please do. Because otherwise, while we may be able to hear you, the audience that's listening can't.
Thousands of people at home watching this.
I'm sorry. The ordinance that created us had both what we considered requirements and considerations. And we mentioned this in the report. And one of the considerations, although it's not something that was a primary consideration, is that we consider the socioeconomic nature of the ward. And so in that regard, there is, at least on the table, the idea that wards have certain characters that are based in the demographics of the ward. And in not wanting to rearrange the wards dramatically, we don't want to rearrange those characteristics. And so they pretty much maintain the same characteristics as the current distribution.
Oh, okay. I still feel that that's irrelevant, because when you start worrying about race and ethnicity, then and sort of saying we want to keep the character, that's tantamount to gerrymandering. If populations and ethnicities move as they are doing as we speak, and every day they change because there's constant turnover and shifts, we'll drive ourselves crazy trying to keep the past arrangements of ethnicity and race to keep them stable. People move around and neighborhoods shift over time, inevitably, albeit slowly. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add that my recollection is that there have been discussions in the past about kind of the way, the guiding principle about how boundaries should be drawn, whether it should be for goals like making sure there is minority representation by having minority wards, or whether it's best to just, spread everything out so that the wards have equal representation in that way. And my sense is that people in the past, in dealing with that, have felt that where we have ended up is the best place to end up. Does the attorney have any observations on that? I know you have some. You've been around longer than I have, and may have some better recollections of those discussions.
I think it's true that the issues of race and national origin, minorities in general, sometimes do factor in importantly in redistricting decisions. And the main concept is that you're not trying to dilute a minority's voting strength, and you may in fact want to try to enhance it, to figure out a way to do that. It sounds like the committee hasn't really done a focus on that aspect of law. It's not in our local law. This would be applying principles from Federal Voting Rights Act law. And I agree with the mayor that in the past, I think there has been discussion of those concerns. It was interesting for me to hear that the committee was trying to have a similar distribution in its A and B options as we've had in the past, in terms of that was one of your ideas, was to keep it somewhat stable. Is that fair?
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. The committee made an effort to have the variance between the biggest and the smallest wards be 10%. And is that, I just wonder if you could, if the city lawyer could explain if that's, I mean, if there's other precedent, if in some cases people have used 5 and 15, what's the?
I think it's 5 when it's against the middle and 10 when it's the biggest to the smallest.
Right.
I think that's the same standard. Ken, do you have anything to say?
It's 10% between the biggest and smallest, and that's so kind of recognized as if you're within that, you're feasibly a portion of it. Sorry, the standard is that there can only be a 10% variance between the biggest and smallest wards, and if you satisfy that, then you're consistent with the constitutional requirement of one person, one vote. It's a lighter standard for local governments than it is for federal representatives because of things like neighborhood and natural boundaries and things like that.
Great, thank you. And then my just second follow-up question is, I don't think at any point we were provided with a map of the current neighborhood association boundaries, and I wonder if do we have that now? If we have that, if the city has that on file, if we could get a copy of that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Recognizing that in some cases there's overlap.
Okay.
You know,
That would be good to know, too.
People who live at an address can be claimed by 2 neighborhood associations.
Or none.
Yes, correct. Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. I want to express a little bit of unease about the neighborhood associations for reasons that Councilmember Siemens has brought up in previous council meetings, that there are many neighborhood, I would say all neighborhood associations have minority membership, not in the sense of racial or ethnic households, but belonging to the association. And there are many neighborhood associations that are inactive. I'm much more comfortable talking about neighborhoods because there is much greater neighborhood cohesion than there is neighborhood association cohesion. So I would not worry too much about the boundaries claimed by neighborhood associations. And I think more about the boundaries of neighborhoods, although those are harder to describe in any kind of factual and objective way. I don't have any... I'm not sure how helpful that is, other than as an expression of a reaction.
And my reaction to that is it can be different in different wards.
Yep.
And I'm aware of how neighborhood associations in various wards can take very different approaches to their existence, their mission, and their sense of cohesion. Anything else that people want to put on the table this evening as things to be pursued, information requested, so that we can continue to work on this? As I said at the beginning, I think the time frame on this is that it's going to take a little time, and we have some time to get it right, but I want to try and front load any of the information that we need so that we can get good information back. Councilmember Daniel Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Clearly, the task force has completed the city council resolution, appointed 9 people, and they examined, they recommended, and they provided at least 2. On our work session packet, it says the council may determine whether to pursue option A or option B, or develop new options. Does the council develop the new options, or does the task force develop the new options? Because
we could do it however we want to do it. We can ask them if they want to. If we choose to ask them to develop additional options and they agree that they want to keep working on this, we could go that route. They could say, thanks, but we've done our work, we're out of here. We could continue to do it, or we could decide that we'll kind of work in tandem for the moment to see what develops and what we want to request them to do.
because that's a direction I'd like to see us go in, one of those ways.
And do we have enough information to know what direction that is yet?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I'm willing to admit that.
Councilmember Mayo.
I would just ask the city attorney or city staff whether they think that within city staff we could handle this set of requests fairly expeditiously ourselves, and if not, then involve the committee, but otherwise it's not clear why we wouldn't just try to get it done. If city staff would know how to move forward on a request, just do that. I don't know if that's the case, though, if you'd rather have the committee involved.
I think that coming back with some information related to the vacant units is something that certainly we can do in-house. I'm trying to think what the other information was that, the concept of splitting the blocks.
Right.
That's.
And it
I'm not
sounds
sure
like
that's
that's kind of
something-
up to the council as we get down to the nitty-gritty of what it is that we're going to do.
Well, I guess we're not just, I'm assuming the next step is not just to come back with an estimate of the vacant units. We already pretty much have that, but it's actually new boundaries, right? I mean,
Well, it's
a step in that direction, at least.
It's if we have that information and we have kind of confirmation that given the criteria of the absolute size of the vacant units under renovation, that's a good criteria, that it's only the two that have been laid out to this point, and what that would mean for the numbers, and my sense is that we would need to hear back, well, kind of the option of, do you want to go with the absolute numbers of the, what was it, 2.62 or 2.77, whichever was the multifamily average for the number of units, or is it the number of units as of a certain date? You know, there are ways to slice and dice that. Is there additional?
No, I mean, I think that those are, it may be that you want the task force to have an opinion about that, or you may just want to make a decision. I mean, I think there'll be several different options that could, from which you could make a choice.
I just want to suggest that I do think if the task force is willing to go back to them with these instructions is really important, because we're creating a kind of record of what we're coming up with that's not tinged by, politician incumbent considerations. It's just based on some group of things that the task force has already been trying to apply. And what we've heard tonight, which came across loud and clear, is they partly need to do something about the vacancy adjustment, and also look more at unifying either wards or ward community groups. But the idea of as little as possible change for the wards is an important principle that I'm hearing tonight, and that would be affected a lot by the vacancy issue being adjusted.
I just wanted to point out that one permissible goal in shaping the districts is preventing incumbents from having to run against each other. So it is a valid consideration of taking Derry out of his ward.
No, he's saying it is.
It's okay to do that?
No, he's saying it's not.
I'm saying that the valid goal in shaping the districts would be keeping somebody in the ward where they're already elected.
Thank you.
Isn't that what gerrymandering is?
No.
Is that what you're talking about?
I don't think that's what
You're trying to keep somebody in the ward. I thought that's what we were specifically said, don't do that.
Yeah, could you come to the mic?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but what was just described here is gerrymandering. And it was what was specifically in your instructions to us not to do. And for me to stand here and listen to someone say, you can't have people competing against each other, you have to keep the wards a certain way, that's not serious. That's seriously wrong. And that goes against your instructions to us. So if that's really what you're talking about, then there is something serious wrong.
Mr. Sigmund, were you making a legal judgment or one regarding the council's instructions to the task force?
I'm explaining that that is a recognized permissible goal in shaping the district. I'm
Mr.
not
Grib,
saying that they have to do that.
Right. So it's legal and permissible, but Mr. Grib, that doesn't mean that the council didn't direct you not to do that.
No, but I'm just saying that even to put it out there as an acceptable principle goes against your principles that you gave us. So it's irrelevant as far as I'm concerned.
Which is the...
With all due respect, I think we're not talking as carefully as the council's direction. It was not about keeping a particular incumbent in a ward. It was about no ward is gerrymandered, I'm quoting, to ensure the election or defeat of any incumbent or potential candidate. So it's a different question that you were instructed not to look at. I don't believe it's gerrymandering to do what Ken is saying has often been permissible around the country.
Putting two council members in the same ward ensures the defeat of one of them in the election, possible election of the other. Keeping them in separate wards is a way to promote the non-defeat of both of them. So I would agree with Mr. Gribb's
But the guidance we gave said specifically to not guarantee the defeat of either a candidate or an incumbent member of council.
Putting two in the same ward guarantees one will be defeated.
Which would be counter to the guidance that we gave. The guidance that we gave said it should not ensure the defeat of a candidate or an incumbent. And so if an incumbent council member is put into the same space, same ward as a candidate or a newly elected in a special election council member, that will guarantee the defeat of one of those two now newly incumbent council members. Is that not correct? I mean, if you take two council members and you put them in the same ward, the next election will result in one of their defeats.
Assuming they both run.
I think you were saying more or less the same thing I was.
But you were saying you agreed with the resident's comment, and I'm saying I disagree with it.
And I agree with
There are a lot of negatives and so on floating around in here.
I know.
I think the clearest was when Ms. Silber said that we were getting at two different points that kind of sounded the same.
And I guess for me, the point I would just make, sorry to interrupt Councilmember Schultz, that changing the boundaries so that a representative, incumbent or candidate, remains in the same ward but has a different, ward, but not a new competitor within that ward, fits. Swapping council members from one ward to another, for the proposal B swaps K and I into different wards, that clearly doesn't ensure either of our defeats. But in any combination that would put two current or candidate members into the same ward would violate the instructions that we set out, because it would guarantee the defeat at the next election of one of those two members.
And actually, I think based on what we heard, that because you would have to live in the ward for 6 months before you could serve that ward or be elected to that ward, it may guarantee your defeat even if you switch wards.
Unless we did it quickly.
We could trade houses.
But then if you haven't been elected in that ward, do you represent that ward? I don't know.
Well, we got an answer to that in the...
Issue of how you deal with an effective date, yeah.
Can you just say a little bit more about dealing with the effective date?
Ken, why don't you?
Sure. The charter does say you have to live in the ward for 6 months prior to the election. We can make the effective date of the ward boundary changes for purposes of the upcoming election 6 months, or at least 6 months ahead of time, so that people know what ward they live in, so they know where they can run. But that wouldn't have any effect on incumbents until the election. They'd continue to represent their old ward boundary, within the old boundaries until the election. And if they're re-elected, they represent the newly shaped ward.
That's hard to understand. And I'll use myself just because option A, had me moving to Ward 5. So if we redo the boundary 6 months before the election, okay, then I'm in Ward 4 until that boundary is redone, and then I'm in Ward 5, and you're saying I could continue to represent Ward 4 until
That's right.
until the election, even though I don't live in that ward anymore?
Yes.
Correct.
Because the ward would still exist for purposes of your representation until the next council took its seat.
But for purposes of the election, the ward doesn't exist.
Right, you
I'm
live
in
in
Ward
Ward
5,
5.
so I'm actually in 2 wards, depending on which rule we want to look at.
Whether it's forward-looking or backward-looking.
It's preparing you for your mayoral run.
Well,
I know that.
I think one of the other principles we found in the case law, which might be helpful, is it's a different kind of issue if you move out of your ward. If by your own volition you just move to another part of the city. But when this kind of involuntary change occurs, it's just a different standard and a different way of handling it.
Councilmember Schultz.
I'm inclined to sort of say that gerrymandering is gerrymandering. If it's for a noble cause, let's say we think that balancing race is a noble thing, it's still gerrymandering if it's done to isolate a race and minimize that race's effectiveness, and that's gerrymandering as well. I kind of inclined to think that our order to make sure that you don't put 2 council people in the same ward is sort of saying, you can do that kind of gerrymandering. And that would be my opinion. I'm not going to say this was the order the directions that we gave to the redistricting committee. It's no point. I don't think we should change it in midstream. But I do think that the discussion that we're having right now is the reason why we should continue to have the redistricting committee work on this once we've established what the vacancy changes would be, to give those numbers back to the redistricting committee, to keep it out of our hands here for as long as possible, for them to come back with some the altered options, and then let us make the decision from that point on, so that we can depoliticize either, whether it's just, even if it's just from appearances purposes, as much as possible, this process. Because we may, in theory at least, it may could in theory come to a point where no matter what you did, you were going to have 2 candidates in the same ward, if you were going to give the highest primary precedent to balancing the ward, the populations. Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
It's interesting to hear discussions about depoliticizing the most political thing that there is.
This is a new button.
Okay, Councilmember Daniels, go on.
Thank you, Mayor. And all I want to say is, regardless of who goes back, whether it's the task force or it's the task force and the council or a whole nother group, I listened last week to what you said. You did what you said you were going to do. Those things got done. But the requirements for redistricting and the considerations for redistricting were considered in option A. In option B, you said you really didn't, my listening was, you didn't really adhere to or pay that much attention to the considerations for redistricting, just to the requirements. And part of the heart of the redistricting is in the considerations. A commonality of social and economic interest, preservation of the cores of existing wards. These are all things that we also directed you to do. Geographic compactness of the wards and respect for neighborhoods and neighborhood associations. And that would be my only request, is no matter who does it, that we look at the heart and how this redistricting really will or will not serve the citizens of Tacoma Park, because it's about heart as well as just numbers on a piece of paper. I'm done.
I have two comments. One, the first option clearly included considerations in the mandatory requirements. The reason why we looked at option B is extreme. That doesn't mean we can't learn from option B and say, where are we on that pendulum? So if you see option A over here saying, okay, all the considerations and the mandatory were considered, and here's B, just the mandatory considered, where are we on that pendulum? I think it's nice to see the group here go through what we've gone through for several weeks. We don't, months, sorry, months. It's a very difficult task, as you can see from the last hour. And we had months to discuss this. And we've raised everything you've discussed tonight, we have discussed at length. For me, if I'm going to be asked to do something in addition to what we did, I would want the exact formula to apply to all the wards that was going to meet the standard that's the legal standard. So if you want to pick 10%, this group, I don't want this group to pick that 10% of more vacant of a building is there for applied X, and that's how we're going to go forward. I want a formula that we're going to apply, and that would become the 5th mandatory requirement.
Then we don't need people, we just need a machine.
Well, first of all, I just want to address the option A versus option B issue in terms of the requirements and the considerations. Both the requirements came first because they were requirements. So the requirements came first in both options we came to, and all of the options that we considered that you didn't see.
Which were somewhere between A and X?
Which were somewhere between A and X.
Because all of a sudden, option X became option B.
Well, that was just a misprint in a map.
Okay.
It was always intended to be option B, and it was mismarked in the original map that was created. That's how it became. That's where the X came from. But in what we had to do, what we decided we needed to do was give you two clear options. In other words, we didn't want to come to you with one option that moved this here, and it was just these little tweaks, which is what option A is. It's essentially a tweak, and somebody, I can't remember who, but one of you used that term earlier. It was a tweak. I think it was you, Mayor, who said tweaking the map. So option A is essentially tweaking the existing map to achieve both the requirements and take as much as possible the considerations into effect. Option B was an attempt to give you a clear choice in terms of the work that we had done over the months that we worked on this. We seriously considered bringing you essentially option A and option A.1 that was just a couple of different minor little tweaks to the system. But because those tweaks didn't make any had no significant differences. In other words, we still had situations where council members were moved into other districts. We still had issues where neighborhood associations didn't quite work out the way we would have liked them to work out. We didn't feel we were giving you any real choice by bringing you option A.1 and option A.2. We felt in order to give you something to really consider, we needed to look at this freshly, without the, quote, tweaking approach to the way wards are based in the city of Tacoma Park. So that's where option B came out. It was not a lack of attention to the considerations. It was simply more of an attempt to look at the wards and I don't want to say start from scratch because that's not entirely accurate, but to step back and say, okay, what's the easiest way to achieve one person, one vote with all of these other things? And that started with the requirements, and it did have a bigger effect on the considerations than option A did, but it wasn't that we ignored the considerations. Oftentimes, and everybody who's ever had to do redistricting anywhere in the country has certainly experienced this, maps of districts and wards end up looking completely ridiculous. If you look at the current ward map, Ward 3, I think it is, has this giant bulbous center thing that just looks utterly ridiculous. How on earth did this ward get shaped that way? We were told by a number of people how it got to be that way, and I don't want to bring that up right now, but we tried to make option B an attempt to avoid that kind of bizarrely shaped ward to make everybody happy. That's why the difference between A and B exists. So I just wanted to be clear that it wasn't that we didn't consider the considerations when we did option B. And I wanted to make that very, very clear because what I was hearing was that there were some thoughts that was the case. Thank you.
He said last week.
Let me just add a comment on that because and I really thank the committee for option B because it really did at least make me think. I mean, it's a very different way to look at the city. You have simplified boundaries so that there's fewer left and right turns and blocks cut in half. And so, I mean, it's at least, for me, just intellectually, it's let me think about this in a different way. So I appreciate that.
I think the one thing that I think we had as a consideration that I think has become obvious as a higher priority for us is probably more of a requirement, and that is the neighborhood, the last one on the considerations list, keeping the neighborhood and the neighborhood associations together. And I think that's where a big part of the sticking point is.
Can I make just two comments? One is that as we met as a task force, I think one of the key things was the requirements. Those were our goals. That was what we were given. We really needed to, and we tried. And I think we tried very hard, as has been explained by, I think, all of us. One of the things that's been missing here in the discussion this evening, and I would hope you would do it when you have your own discussion, you go back to those requirements. We knew what our goals were. Those 4 issues, the requirements. I haven't heard those mentioned among your discussion as to what you're trying to achieve. And so I think that it would be helpful to the city for you to reaffirm that this is what we're trying to achieve with redistricting. Those requirements. That's what you gave us. So that's just one request as a citizen. Reaffirm if that's really what you believe. And if you're going to ask us to do something else, reaffirm that, yes, that's what you want us to do.
As I said, as you were approaching the podium, that was exactly what I was questioning.
Yeah.
I think that the question that has come to this council is that we're looking at those considerations and the requirements and saying, well, wait a minute, we're not agreeing with what we said was the requirements.
Yeah, well,
we're saying that at least one of these considerations was much more important to us than what we told you guys.
Well, and I think excuse me, let me just finish, and then
I'm sorry.
I'll go sit down or go home. I'm getting tired. The other
You're
thing
not allowed to. We're here.
I knew there's a reason I wasn't on council. The other thing I'd like to point out is that we talk about neighborhoods, but and wards. They're 2 totally different things. A neighborhood is a social entity. It's a social conglomerate. It's not a legal thing. It's a neighborhood. It's defined. Seth and I live in the same neighborhood, I guess. We're on this more or less on the same street. Technically, it's different, but that's okay. But I don't even know where the boundaries of the neighborhood are. It's a social entity. It's people that get together. And you go back into all kinds of social science. Remember when I was in graduate school, you know. But it's a different thing. A ward is a legal, political entity. And I think we're trying to mix up things here that are not mixable, or shouldn't be. Neighborhoods can go across wards, and they do. Housing associations do. And so let's keep this, let's make sure that when we're comparing these things, we're comparing the same thing. And a neighborhood already in this, neighborhoods and associations in this city are all over the place. They're mixed up. There's at least 2 and 3 neighborhoods or associations or both in the same ward. All right? So, you know, let's straighten this out. But it goes back to the goals. Did you mean what you asked us to do? And did you mean what you told the city, that the rest of the population, that this is what you wanted us to do? And so as you have your discussion, clarify that for yourself and for us. Us meaning the citizens. I'm not talking about this task force now. I just think it would be helpful to have that discussion first and then see how things fit together. Okay? Thank you.
And I'll just point out, for one thing, you said that about neighborhoods and neighborhood associations kind of not being legal entities like the wards, that in many cases, neighborhood associations are legal entities. They're
legal in terms of the city structure? I mean, I don't know, maybe they are, but it's not my understanding. I've never, they're not part of the city's governance structure, maybe. They're an association of the people who live in an area, aren't they? Or live
there are neighborhood associations that are legal entities.
Oh, yeah. Okay, they're not illegal entities.
No. I mean, legal structures with
Within the government?
No. Within city policy in our...
Please let's not go out on this branch.
Some are incorporated, and some associations are not incorporated, and I don't think the city makes a distinction.
Right. I agree with that. But it's different council members' experiences of neighborhoods and neighborhood associations can be very different. We're going to end this sooner or later. Are these lights new over here?
I can end it now. I don't need to talk.
Okay. Thank you all.
This was great. We
What's the
talked
next
for this
step?
long with no conclusion?
We had some conclusions.
Okay.
We've continued to talk after the conclusions.
Okay.
What's the next step?
Next step is staff is going to come back with the information we requested, and we'll take it from there. Now you're looking like,
I am.
no, that isn't it.
I guess the task force may wonder, do you in fact wish them to do more work once you hear from the staff?
We will wish the task force to do more work. We haven't defined that yet.
Okay, but you may be asking them to
Correct.
continue.
Correct. Assuming they're willing to do so.
Thank you for coming tonight.
We have one additional item, which is the follow-up to council procedures discussion, and we have the revised piece here, and I think what we have is the redlined version, and the one behind it is kind of the bigger redlined version.
Right,
But the text is the same.
Yes, the draft of May 31st, the May 31 draft is a clean copy of what you've seen before, with some minor revisions that the city attorney suggested. And if the council is comfortable with these changes, then if you're comfortable with that, then staff could prepare a resolution for council to adopt new procedures.
Okay, that wasn't clear to me that it was the first one with only a little bit of redlining that was highlighting the city attorney's changes.
Yes.
I'm going to wipe out all lights now. Are there questions?
Well, to have read it, I guess, I don't know.
Not until you've read it?
Right. I've not had a chance to read it.
Oh,
I could point out just a few of the changes. They're very minor. This is essentially what you saw before.
right.
In Section 2, a majority of the council shall constitute a quorum for purposes of transacting business except as otherwise provided in the city charter. The city attorney pointed out that that is a city charter governed item. In the item 7, where it addresses council members may announce that they plan to introduce legislation, given that the mayor has the authority to set the agenda, she felt it was important to make clear that this didn't supersede the mayor's authority to set the agenda, that in fact asking the mayor to add something to the agenda doesn't require you to put it on the agenda, require the mayor to put it on the agenda. Item 14, where we had said the council meetings will be recorded, the city attorney had suggested adding the word ordinarily because in the event that the council had to meet and there was no power and no possibility of recording, that the council would still need to meet. And so she suggested adding the word ordinarily to that. And then at the end, with the electronic communication, special rules for electronic participation, just at the very end, just to clarify that the oral communication has to be, that everyone, all the council members need to be able to hear the person on the phone, and the person on the phone needs to be able to hear all the council members when they speak, so that you're all hearing the same things at the same time.
It's a two-way street.
Right, right. And those are the changes from the last version.
And council members can't play Angry Birds.
You could write that in here. I haven't seen much of that lately.
Any questions about this document? Everybody happy with it?
I'm happy with it.
Me too.
Is there anybody who's not happy with it? Okay, then we will bring it back for a vote.
Okay. I'd suggest that it come back next week if that's all right. Sure.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. We're adjourned.
Love it, love it, love it. I do plan to participate.
Rocks and sticks, bricks and bones, people frightened in their homes. Well, tell me something that I don't already know. Proselytize it on the TV show. Well, there's fireside chats,